Live stream audio check.
yourself.
Right, time to resume now. And unless we have got Mr. Robertson, we have.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll start with your contribution now.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Corinne Roberts, and I'm living at 7 Dark Lane in Backwell. Unfortunately, when I'm reading this, I'm a bit staccato because I don't have very good lungs and my breath is quite short. So if you can forgive me. And I've said I live with my husband, my carer, Porrick, giving me the opportunity to give my statement to you in my position as both a parent of a child who formerly attended the junior school, but also in particular, at the moment it is as a wheelchair user, which our views are often not very well represented, but are of particular relevance, I feel, to what we're talking about today. If my voice becomes particularly weak, my husband will take over and talk on my behalf. We've lived here for over 23 years, having moved from Bristol to find a level access bungalow, ideally with no stairs. I have multiple sclerosis, which we knew then could potentially be progressive. So I could always, although I was walking at the time, then we thought I may well need a wheelchair, and that has in fact happened. So as my disability has progressed, I've gone from a relator to using a scooter, and it was using a scooter that I was able to assist my daughter to the juniors, and then also able to help in a school and stay involved. And that was really important to me, because I know how very important the early years and infant junior education is. Obviously, I mention it as a former head teacher of a nursery school in Bristol, so I was able to do that. And then as Molly became more independent, I could feel confident that she would be able to walk on her own up to the school. And that was really important to me. Also related to that was I was aware that as my MS progressed, I was unlikely to be able to drive for much longer. And therefore having local friends was really important too. Going to the local school, she could make local friends. I'm getting lost here. In all the various planning papers and submissions by the developers and their advisors, there's been little or no mention of the impact of the proposed access arrangements for disabled people. I obviously focus on mobility and wheelchair users, but I'm also aware of people with limited sight, and I wonder on anybody with any visual disturbances whether they would have issues with it as well, whether their needs have been taken into consideration. I feel strongly that my concerns as a disabled resident and a wheelchair user in particular have been ignored or just disregarded by North Somerset Council and Persimmon, that my rights under the Equality Act 2010 have been completely disregarded, and the legal duties and obligations of North Somerset Council and Persimmon under this Act have not therefore been fulfilled. The proposal as it is will have a profound and detrimental impact on my limited life. The level access nature and the quality of the air and around Dark Lane is fundamentally important. I notice in the very, very important representation so far about the perspective of the children and the impact of the increase in the level of the traffic has been on the safety concerns, but nowhere as yet has reference been made to the impact on the quality of the air, and inevitably, if there is an increase in level of traffic, there will inevitably be a decrease in the quality of air, an increase of pollution. And all of us know that there has been even local, very controversial news about the impact on children with already impaired or difficulty breathing, and the impact on asthmatics in particular. But I digress. The construction phase, including roadworks, temporary pathways and diversions, will severely restrict the safe access and movement for wheelchair users, elderly residents and school children, and even or obstructed pathways can make independent travel impossible and increase the risk of injury. I'm always aware, even at present, the camber of the pavements can, any sort of level or, change in the camber can end up with a chair lurching into the road. And I've gone from being a scooter user to now being permanently in a wheelchair. So, and at the moment I'm using, because I'm using an electric wheelchair, but it needs to be controlled by somebody else, as even that control is restricted, and therefore I need wider pathway. I'm very concerned about the blind access use sightlines that have been referred to a few times, because I am very restricted in my vision in the chair. already. The proposed removal of on-street parking that's been referred to is particularly significant for me personally, because at the moment, if I lurch off the road, then at worst I do damage to the parked car. But where there are no parked cars, I will lurch into the face of oncoming cars or ones following me from behind, and that's really, potentially life-threatening even. So that's very scary. At the moment, on a good day, when I'm feeling well, I can go out on my own or with one of the carers. The proposal will be access and changes to dark lane will potentially rob me one of the last but no less important piece of independence, as I'll no longer have a safe, uninterrupted route up dark lane. Those speed cushions, other traffic calming measures will significantly impact on my journey up dark lane in the event that there is less room on the road for me in my wheelchair, or when I'm on the pavement. My neighbour at number 18, directly opposite number 23, is also affected by MS, and we are both deeply concerned about the noise, increased air pollution, and disproportionate disruption in the access and traffic calming measures or causes, both during and after the construction process. I've already mentioned that the increased air pollution is particularly, and the toxic fumes is particularly a concern to me with the MS and with anybody with limited function. I know there's another woman over the road with COPD, and she would be particularly needed for it. I don't want to repeat myself, I'm just thinking. So at any rate, in summary, the proposed access arrangements are fundamentally unsafe for me as a disabled wheelchair user and resident. The local authority, North Somerset Council and the developers, Charles Church Persimmon, the legal tutor under the Equality Act 2010, and the public sector equality duty to ensure disabled individuals are not disadvantaged. Being indicated what point to talk about. So my quality of life will be severely impacted, and that it will profoundly limit my ability to safely see friends and just get around. So that's really participate in my local community. I know there are a couple of members of my local support group that are on dark lane, and just simply to access their houses is going to be really difficult. I don't really want to take the risk of becoming more, life is limited in a wheelchair, which fortuitously a lot of you have never personally experienced, but I don't want to get further isolated. That's it. So, request for action, I urge you and make a personal plea to you, Mr. Webb, and the planning authorities to refuse and stop this planning applications in order for our concerns to be considered seriously, to reject the current plans until a full equality impact assessment is carried out, to ensure that all pedestrian routes remain wheelchair accessible throughout construction, to enforce compliance with the building regulations, Part N and BS 8300 standards for disabled access. Thank you for your time and consideration. I do appreciate the opportunity to voice these concerns and to urge you to prioritise safety and accessibility for children and disabled adults and children in your decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any questions? Okay, did we want to go back to Mr. Brand? Have you had a chance to read the document?
Yes, sir, I have, thank you.
Right, Mr. Young, did you have some questions? Yes, I do. Just before you ask those, though, having read that document, was there anything in particular you wanted to add?
Yes, sir, thank you for the opportunity. With regards to the safety audit, I was somewhat surprised that there wasn't mention from the safety audit team of the absence from the audited drawings of pedestrian and vehicular visibility displays, and maybe that is cause for them of not being raised as a safety concern within the audit. So it was more of an observation in terms of what I would have expected.
Okay, Mr. Young, if you'd like to start.
Thank you. So I've got your statement, and the two things I want to particularly focus on are on page 4, where you say specifically they cannot be achieved for, and then you set out 2 specific points. And what I'd like to do is just discuss those, if that's okay. The first thing you say is the proposed pedestrian crossing east of Summerlands and west of the site access, shown by the tactile paving on the appellant's drawing in the south to north crossing direction. This has a seriously inadequate sight line to the right. I've measured this as 6 metres. So what you're talking about is being on the western side of Dark Lane, is that right?
That's correct.
And then crossing the road to get to the eastern side, yes?
That's it, to the site side.
Yeah. Now, 2 things. First of all, what my witnesses observed is that there is a desire line already. So people come down Summerlands, and also there's some alleyways to the back of Summerlands as well, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah. Just wait a minute. Okay. The position is that to get to the school, people are crossing the road at that point already, aren't they?
Yes, quite likely.
Yeah. So when we think about the 6 metres, it's right to say that within the carriageway, or within the highway land, I should say, there is vegetation at the moment, isn't there?
My measurement did not take into account the vegetation. It took into account the highway boundary with the private adjoining land. So
Yeah.
it was on the assumption that the vegetation was cut back.
Okay, is there vegetation there?
Yes, there was someone during my last site visit.
Yeah, and that can be cut back, as you rightly observed, can't it?
It can, but the drawing TP008 shows the highway boundaries clearly being the edge of carriageway on that side of the road.
Yeah.
And therefore it is that I have measured to.
Okay, you're familiar with Manual for Streets, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I ask that you be provided with a copy of an extract from that? I'll just pass that up to you as well, sir. Now, if you look at the extract below the picture from Poundbury, you've got obstacles to visibility. Parking in visibility displays in built-up areas is quite common. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yet it does not appear to create significant problems in practice. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just want to explore this. First of all, in terms of parked cars, the cars tend to park on the eastern side of Dark Lane, where the footway is, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. They tend not to park on the western side. Is that right?
That's correct.
So when one is arriving from Summerlands at that point of crossing, they're already making that manoeuvre. What is the accident data for pedestrian collisions, please, at that location?
There are none.
None. Good. Okay. Secondly, of course, you'll appreciate that those pedestrians for whom we're providing a crossing point are not residents of our own development, are they?
That's with respect to false narrative that once an engineer puts pen to paper or pixel to computer, it is their responsibility to provide due regard to the safety and compliance to technical standards.
And now what's the answer to my question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. Please focus on the question. Do you remember the question?
Can you please repeat the question?
Do you remember the question is my question now. Do you remember the question I asked you?
So, with regards to the crossing, at the moment is an existing footfall that occurs, but at the moment there is not tactile paving that directs the pedestrians to that.
No, you've not listened to the question. Forgive me. I'll go back and I'll make the question clear. The people who are coming down Summerlands and who are crossing the road from west to east are not the people from our development, are they?
No, there is existing footfall.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's just focus on the questions if we can. And then what we're doing is raising the height of the road surface. So there'll be a raised platform there, yes?
That's correct.
Yes, that is intended to have two beneficial effects. First of all, it will be a speed hump effect, so it will reduce the speed of vehicles, yes?
Yes, that's the intention.
Secondly, pedestrians then don't have to step into the road. They know that they are there crossing on an at-grade surface, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Third point is the intention is to have a different surface topping on that, isn't it?
I'm not sure I've interpreted the drawings to state that, but if that's the intention, then yes, I'm.
Yeah, and that would be sensible. That's consistent with all the guidance, isn't it? You create a vision as well as a physical horizontal deflection. You create a visual alternative colour. Yes.
Yes, that's one of the engineering solutions.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. Now we are providing betterment. Then, quite obviously.
Sorry, a question.
We are providing betterment, quite obviously, aren't we?
Yes, you're providing a traffic management scheme in response to an inadequate junction layout.
Yeah, and therefore it's going to be easier and safer for pedestrians to cross the road who already cross at that point.
But the design does not address the visibility display. So you are providing physical mitigation,
Yeah.
granted,
Yeah, good.
but the
Okay.
visibility display for those pedestrians in that direction of travel is not dealt with.
Yeah, because the pedestrians can then choose to step out, and as you step out into the road, how wide is the road at that point?
With the reduction in the taper at the end of the lay-by, I believe it's about 6 metres.
Yeah, and is that wide enough for two vehicles to pass?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Now, we had suggested previously with the access way that it be built out into the road, but that was met with fierce opposition from the local highway authority and some residents in terms of narrowing the carriageway. Elsewhere, there are existing carriageway width reductions. So the council are not keen for us to reduce the width of the road. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was.
What we could do to increase that visibility would be to build out into the road, and then if you did that, you'd provide better visibility, wouldn't you?
It would, yes.
Yeah, but the difficulty we have is they don't want the carriageway width reduced. So as a consequence, we can't build out, can we?
No.
No. But if I'm a pedestrian, okay, imagine me as a pedestrian on Dark Lane, and I'm going to cross the road. I'm going to be looking to see the traffic on particularly the direction where it's restricted. We've got rid of the vegetation, and I'm going to step out maybe one step first of all before I make the full 6 metres across, and I'm going to be looking up the road, and if I see a vehicle coming down the road, I can step back to the curb, can't I? To the pavement.
Yes, you can, but the design guidance is explicit in this matter that the decision must be made a minimum of 1.5 metres from the carriageway edge to make that decision that it is safe to proceed.
But we're not dealing with people who can't think, are we? We're not dealing with machines or robots. We're dealing with people who can look up the road and go, oh look, there's a lorry coming, and then step back. They can do that, can't they?
I say the guidance is based on extensive research of real-life people's behaviour and responses, and it takes into account exactly what you've said.
Yeah, and we're dealing with an existing road, aren't we? We're not designing the new roads that go around HS2, for example, for which there's some exciting new guidance. We're designing for an existing street, yes?
Yes.
Which is an existing residential street, yes?
Yes.
Where the road speed has already been reduced to 20 miles an hour, yes?
The speed limit has been reduced.
Speed limit, you're quite right, speed limit, and where we are introducing a variety of additional measures to reinforce that, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, good, okay. And then if we think about going the other way, because I suppose residents from our development can obviously leave, I mean, they can come back as well, but let's imagine they are going to cross the road, or anybody else who's using that crossing, or the children coming back from school, or accompanied by their parents or not, and they're using that crossing. It says at 7.8.5, parked cars don't appear to be a significant problem in practice. Ideally, defined parking bays should be provided outside the visibility displays. However, in some circumstances where speeds are low, some encroachment may be acceptable. If we think about the parked cars, first of all, there are not going to be any parked cars around our access way, our entrance way, and the council have asked for a TRO to introduce restrictions, haven't they?
They have.
So we don't need to worry about cars there. But if I look down the lane, if that's the right term, if I look north, then there are actually parking bays which are set back from the carriageway, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, so it achieves that. But even if that were not the case, it says there, look, if speeds are low, 20 mile an hour speed limit to be reinforced further by a whole series of measures, vertical deflection, more signage, more road markings, then we are dealing with a situation where speeds are low, aren't they?
That's it. The intention is to bring speeds in line with the speed limit.
Yeah.
Therefore, design in accordance with the design speed of the road. Where the technical standards are quite straightforward.
What is the visibility then? If I'm standing at the crossing and I want to go east-west, what is my visibility to my left?
Your visibility to the left, looking, what I would say, up the lane, up gradient.
I'm with you, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would be subject to parked vehicles, and we've discussed in terms of a TRO for those. It would be satisfactory in terms of the 25-metre visibility display.
Yeah, yeah. And the 25 metres comes from a 20 mile an hour speed, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. When I look down the lane, what's the visibility like that way?
It would be the same because the park into down the lane would be inset into the lay-by.
Okay, perfect. Now, the other point you raised, point 2, both proposed pedestrian crossing points on the site access, so we're now talking about the access way, and in some of the drawings I've seen it's shown in shaded yellow, not always that clear against the grey, but it's a yellow area. You say, are shown by the tactile paving on the appellant's drawing, have sight lines in the direction of dark lane equating to 5 metres, whereas the requirement is 20. Now, if I'm going to cross the access way, I'm crossing where the traffic is, first of all, coming out of the development, yes?
Yes.
They're coming up to a junction, yes? In what is already a 20 mile an hour speed limit environment, so they're going to be travelling very slowly, aren't they?
That's it. Yes, so we designed to the design speed, 20 miles per hour.
Yeah, and I can look up the road, and although we could provide parking bays for displaced parking on Park Lane within our development, beyond the access drawing point, so within the development where the reserve matters, although we could provide that, they can be set back from the carriageway, so there aren't any problems with the visibility as I cross the road from up the hill to down the hill, south to north. If I look to my right, there aren't going to be visibility problems, are there?
No, certainly. The Statement of Common Ground mentions at 3.621 the displacement of parking onto the site access road, and I agree that that could be managed in terms of that being displaced so it did not impede that visibility display.
Yeah. The 5 metres that you've talked about the other way has to be in the context that the access way that I'm crossing is actually a junction, so although I can't see 20 metres down Dark Lane, that's because of the laws of physics. It is a T-junction, and I can't see beyond the houses on the other side of the road, can I?
You can't see for the required visibility display because it's land outside of your control.
No. I'm not being. I'm obviously not being clear. I want to cross the road, okay, from the south side to the north, okay, and there immediately to my left-hand side is a junction. Yes.
Yes.
Why do I need to see into the 20 metres into the gardens of the houses on the other side of the road? Why would I need to see into those to cross the road in front of me?
You must be able to see to ensure that it is safe to proceed for an approaching vehicle at the speed limit of the road.
But what you're suggesting means that nobody in England could ever cross near a junction, ever. You could never cross any junction in England.
The design guidance is very straightforward, very explicit on this matter. It states at a crossing point or at a junction. It explicitly states a junction. The sight line must be measured based on the design speed of the road.
But listen to me, if I can put it this way. I'm trying to be as polite as I can, okay? This makes absolutely no sense. I mean, literally no sense, because what you're talking about is that you've got to have a visibility display that goes to the junction and then across the road, which obviously is clear, the pavement on the other side, and then extends into people's gardens at any junction where there are houses opposite the junction. I mean, how can that be right?
Because we design junctions and obviously land acquisitions to facilitate that junction.
But why do we need to build land acquisition? Why do we need to buy the houses opposite our junction? Why would we have to do that?
As with vehicular visibility display, the displays will radiate out from the junction to both sides, and it is that land that is required to ensure.
Yeah, but the land you're talking about hasn't got any vehicles on it, has it?
No.
No. So why on earth would you need to see into somebody's garden to check the visibility for vehicles when there's no vehicles driving through the garden?
Because that land creates a blind spot to the position where a vehicle would be approaching from.
No, a vehicle would not be approaching through somebody's garden or through their house. That just wouldn't happen, hence my reference to the laws of physics. I'm crossing by a junction. What I've got to do to cross a junction is I've got to look over my shoulder, yes?
Yes.
Do you see people who cross roads looking over their shoulders?
Yes.
Yeah, it happens every day, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the visibility I need to check. I need to look over my shoulder to check somebody isn't turning into the access way, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I need to look ahead of me to see if there's anybody on Dart Lane turning in that way, yes?
Yes.
I don't need to see into the garden of the house immediately perpendicular to my right and look into their garden, because there isn't going to be a car coming through their garden or through their front window, is there?
But in this case...
Just answer, not but, because that's not an answer to a question. That's right. Qualify it with your standards. We must follow standards. But I'm right, aren't I?
There will, yeah, I absolutely
Yes?
agree. There will
Yeah,
not
good.
be a vehicle within the third-party property, but there will be could be a vehicle approaching on the carriageway that is obscured by that third-party property.
No, none of this is true, okay? We need to really knuckle down on the common sense here. I need to look behind me so I can see the car coming if it's turning in, yes?
Yes.
Which we agreed is something that people do all the time. Yes? Yeah, I have children. What do I say to them? If you're going to cross the road, look over your shoulder. Yes? We all do it, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking ahead of me to see if there's a car turning into the access way, yes? The only way in which people can have any conflict with me crossing the access way is if they're coming down the access way, where we've agreed that there is suitable visibility, yes?
Yes.
And that they are turning either right from coming down the hill or turning left from coming up the hill, yes?
That's correct.
It's not a crossroads, you do know that, don't you? It's not a crossroads.
Yes, clearly it's a T-junction.
So there's no vehicles where I need to look into or turn to my right. I'd be much more sensible to look over my shoulder, wouldn't I?
And that is what I am
Is that a
stating.
yes? It would be much more sensible to look over my shoulder, wouldn't it?
That is what I'm stating, that you need to look over your shoulder, and that sight line crosses third-party land.
Okay, so what you're saying is when I look over look over my shoulder at the access point, so the point exactly which is set back a little bit from the access point, and the houses are off to my right, I can't see back down the road. Of course I can see back down the road, can't I?
From the crossing point, I think the thorough way to respond to this is to take from the south to the north. When I look left towards Dark Lane, and I look over my left shoulder, as you stated, when I look over my left shoulder, the visibility to the left would be obscured by the third-party land.
No.
Number 25?
No, just help me with this. There are two crossing points on the access way, yes?
Yes.
Which one are you talking about?
So there is, on the access way, there is tactile paving shown across the side arm, the site arm, within the site land.
So not the one at the junction, the one further in, yes?
The one set into the junction.
Okay,
There
that's
is
my-
not
that's my
one-
fault for not
There is
being-
not one shown on the current plan
Yeah.
at the junction.
Yeah, well, I have seen the plans that show, but I've said it's very difficult to notice it because of the colours. However, let's just assume that. Where did you think the two crossing points are?
So on plan TP014, the crossing point is shown by the yellow hatched area past the tangent point, or just at the tangent point of the radii where it meets the site access.
Yes.
I can't see a further one closer to Dark Lane.
Okay, there is, well, because people are going to, if I'm walking down Dart Lane, okay, and I want to cross the access point in this low speed environment, I'm just going to walk across the access way. I'm not going to go into the development, am I, to cross it? I'm just going to walk across from one side of the pavement
That
to the
would be
other.
impeded by the ramp up to the table. So if you are mobility impaired, and equally, you would be guided towards the tactile pavement.
Okay, how long do you think the vertical deflection is on the ramp?
Looking at the drawing, it appears to be about 1 metre.
Okay, so right, now I've got to move slightly to 1 metre, yes, to the side, and then I cross over. That's not that's the crossing I've been talking about, but let's deal with the crossing you're talking about, which is further into the site, yes?
That's it. I'm dealing with the crossing as drawn.
Okay, so how far from the entrance of, or how far from the T-junction is that point that you're looking at?
Given that it's a 6 metre radii, it appears to be 5 metres into the site.
Okay, all right, so we've gone 5 metres into the site. Somebody's got to make that conscious decision. Do you appreciate the desire line is to cross from one side of the pavement on Dart Lane to the other?
In which case, the tactile paving and the design needs to be altered to reflect that.
But you've only got to move a metre. You haven't got to move 5 metres. I don't think people are going to have any difficulty. Because you're saying what you don't want to do is step out onto the upward deflection slope, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, because I might do it and school children might do it, but somebody in a wheelchair would want to be on the surface that is effectively at grade, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, and the mobility scooter and lots of other people, those that are infirm. So what we're doing is we're providing a table so that people don't have to step into the road, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I've only got to go a metre that way to achieve that, haven't I?
Yes, in which case the design needs to be altered to accommodate that.
Yeah, it may be that in terms of the detailed design stage, we have to be clear exactly where the crossing point is, but we've agreed there are two, your evidence, there are two crossing points, aren't there?
There is one crossing point of the site access arm, and that is clearly illustrated on the submitted plan, TP014. There is no other illustration or annotation to suggest an alternative or addition.
Is your view then that it should come closer to the junction to achieve better visibility?
It's my view that being closer to the junction would achieve better visibility. Whether it complies to technical standards, that's for the engineer, the design responsibility.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, which is in terms of that visibility. But even if it stays where it is at the detailed design stage, the fact is the vehicles that we're looking to observe as we cross the road will inevitably have had to turn into the junction, yes?
They will be in the process of turning, yes.
Yeah. So their speed will reflect the fact that they are turning from one residential road at 20 miles an hour into another residential road at 20 miles an hour and making a manoeuvre, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. It's going to be a very low speed, isn't it?
It's going to be, but the design requirement,
very
and the
low.
design requirement is not set arbitrarily. It is based on research, and it is for the design speed of the road at 20 miles per
and
hour.
in existing environments, adhering to standards is not always possible, is it?
No, and that's when the engineer takes responsibility for the interpretation.
Yes, and so in this case, we've been through a process whereby there was a road safety audit given to a third-party engineer, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Then, unusually, certainly from my point of view, we see not only the response from our transport expert, highway expert, but then it had to go to the local authority to look at his response to the auditor's response, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. And we provided you with that as well. Have you seen that?
Yes, I received that at lunchtime, thank you.
Okay, and so the position is we've got effectively three engineers looking at this. We've got the original scheme designer, who is my witness. We've got the independent auditor, and then we've got the council's own safety team looking at it as well, yes?
Yes.
And none of them raised a concern about this, did they?
No, which I've already expressed my surprise at.
Yeah, but also I'm going to express our surprise at you can't see the common sense aspect of a low-speed environment here where none of these engineers, all properly qualified, could see any substance to any of the points that you're making, which would suggest perhaps, because there's three of them and they're against you, which suggests that none of them think there's any substance to what you're saying. That would be a fair conclusion, wouldn't it?
Yes, it's for them to be answerable to their decisions.
Yeah, and these, yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, shall we have Mr. Neil Brain now?
Sir, may I just say that due to the change of timetable, Mr. Brains had to go back to work, but he has left his statement for you, and I think in view of this morning's submissions, we'll accept that, that contribution as read, if that's agreeable with you.
Okay. Is that... yeah. Okay, Mrs. Lorraine Hopkinson.
Thank you. My name's Lorraine Hopkinson, and I've lived in Backwell for 20 years. I have 2 children who both attended Backwell schools, and although my youngest now attends secondary school, I am very familiar with Dark Lane and the potential dangers faced by the young children attending Backwell's Church of England Junior School, which is situated at the top of Dark Lane. Dark Lane is a busy, sometimes gridlocked, mixed-use road, which is not only home to the junior school, but the recycling centre, Cheston Combe Business Park, Coles Quarry, St Andrew's Church, and is a well-used cut-through for taxis travelling to and from Bristol Airport. This is, of course, in addition to general traffic for the houses and businesses situated on Dark Lane itself. The road is about 1/3 of a mile long and is on a slope or a hill. There is only one continuous pavement heading up the hill on the left-hand side leading to the junior school. The road continues to a pinch point directly in front of the school, allowing children to cross. Once past this point, there is no pavement. Parents usually park either on Dark Lane itself, space permitting, or drop off elsewhere in the village, or they come directly from home and walk up the hill by themselves. Some children walk and some scooter. Sadly, they are discouraged from cycling because of the traffic dangers. Moving from infant school to junior school and walking independently for the first time is a long-held rite of passage for successive generations for our junior school children. In fact, I still have the Mother's Day card listing the special things my son loved me for. They included having breakfast in bed, being a caring mum, and letting him walk from Micah, which is a shop at the bottom of Dark Lane, on his own to school. We should not underestimate just how important this transition is, not just for the children, but the parents too. Vital life lessons on independence, friendship, and road safety. The physical and mental health benefits of children walking to school are well documented and should be encouraged and facilitated, not taken away and denied. During my tenure as a junior school parent, I was always concerned about the huge skip lorries and the small children, which I've illustrated in photograph 1 and photograph 2 at the end of my statement. Always a worrying mix. I became heavily involved with trying to ensure the lorries were not travelling on Dark Lane during the school drop-off and pick-up times. Trying to ensure the lorries stuck to the permitted times was not an easy task, and I was constantly photographing the lorries who were ignoring the rules. And I was told to buzz off, which is the censored version, more than once. During that time, it is also worth noting that the children had the benefit of Mr. Eaton, the school lollipop man, who saw children across the road at the top of the hill, which I've illustrated in photograph 3. Sadly, once Mr. Eaton retired after more than 20 years' service, a replacement could not be found. The proposal to build houses behind Dark Lane and create a new access road directly across the one and only pavement and our children's safe route to school fills me with fear and dread. Children walk, run, scoot, and unofficially race up and down the hill, usually filled with excitement and joy at either going to school or leaving school, depending on the child. The traffic situation is even more dangerous now, as a wider range of vehicles are using Dark Lane, and there are no restrictions on the lorries or trucks going into the old Coles Quarry, which is being developed into an industrial estate, nor are there restrictions on the cars and vans carrying often unstable loads and pulling trailers going to the recycling centre, nor are there any restrictions on the HGVs accessing Cheston-Combe trading estate. And of course, there is no school crossing patrol. That pavement and safe route to school is needed now more than ever before. I have read the suggested safety mitigation document from Stantec, and I am afraid I am wholly unconvinced. Dark Lane is already a 20-mile-an-hour road, and the painted roundels suggested do little to slow drivers down. And it's evident from Station Road, which is further down from Dark Lane, that paint does not last long, which I've illustrated in photograph 4. Sadly, drivers tend to speed up between speed tables, particularly on longer roads going downhill. And I'm also concerned that the impact these tables would have on large quarry lorries, skip lorries, and vehicles carrying unstable loads and pulling trailers, actually making it even more dangerous. However, the overarching issue for me is removing the children's safe route to school. I have only addressed the day-to-day dangers which would be faced by our children here, and I haven't even touched on the nigh-on impossible safety issues during the building phase, because I would certainly need a lot longer. The risks here are too high, with potentially life-threatening consequences. So I would implore you not to deny our children their safe rite of passage and turn their once safe route to school into a perilous pathway. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Mr. Rob Miles.
Thank you. I am Rob Miles. I'm reading this on behalf of my 88-year-old mother who lives at 25 Dark Lane, our family and myself as a previous resident that lived at 25 Dark Lane and attended the village schools. I also reference our neighbours from 21 Dark Lane whose property also abuts the proposed access. Our concerns and total rejection of the proposed access at 23 Dark Lane, which does not provide adequate sightlines for safe use. We wish to make the additional points based on the following concerns. Firstly, the construction work that will be required to form the junction and access road and its proximity to the boundary line. The foundations to 25 and 21 Dark Lane need to be considered. The access road excavation will need shoring, which has us concerned that this is too close to our property. Secondly, with regards to the traffic accessing and egressing the site constructing the development, the width of the road and footpath will again adversely affect the fabric of both 21 and 25 Dark Lane. Both properties are old, and that will be affected by both the road construction traffic, and end user traffic. We are concerned the noise and disruption to my 88-year-old mother will take its toll on her health. There is a covenant in place on 23 Dark Lane that states the vendor will not at any time hereafter use or permit to be used the said property for any purpose which will be a nuisance or annoyance to adjoining owners and occupiers. This is available for all to see on the Registry of Title and is, in our opinion, in place to stop this type of development that would certainly be a nuisance and annoyance to both 21 and 25 Dark Lane. However, Persimmon's lawyers have failed to respond to our correspondence in December 24, advising them of this legal covenant. We are prepared to pursue the legal routes if Persimmon fail to comply with this covenant, which we have been given legal advice to do so. As previously noted by our original objections, we have major concerns around the site access. It can be seen on Farley Road, the smaller development by Persimmon of 96 dwellings is serviced by the demolition of 2 properties, giving adequate sightlines. To achieve a safe junction, if approved, careful thought will need to be given to this construction. It should also be mentioned that access onto Dark Lane has been the subject of a lot of discussion due to its unsafe visibility splay. We can advise that we will not be forfeiting our walls and hedges. Likewise, at 21 Dark Lane, their hedge will not be compromised. At 21 Dark Lane, according to Charles Church's own ecology assessment, are two of the most significant trees on the whole of Farley Fields visible from the local green space and other viewpoints. These mature trees, a copper beech and a Monterey pine, are important habitats to birds and bats, as well as for their carbon footprint, both being well over 100 years old. Measures must be taken to protect our property foundations, the roots and well-being of our hedges and trees. We will be appointing a party wall surveyor to represent us, and we hope we can assume full cooperation. In summary, on behalf of 21 and 25 Dark Lane, the residents of Dark Lane and Backwell, the current access proposal is flawed. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got no questions. It's just a point of information that covenants are not a matter, it's a private law matter, it's not a matter for planning. Persimmon have taken advice on that issue as well, but I don't trouble you with it because it's not a planning matter.
Can I just make one point? I just believe that we wanted to bring that up because there'd been no correspondence to our letter regarding the covenant, so we wanted to bring it up in this space. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you can't, but I was just helping the inspector with the position.
Right, could we have Councillor Petty?
Thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank our local residents who have communicated so clearly. They raise a range of serious issues. There are multiple areas of doubt for this site. This scheme is not ready for approval. This developer purchased 2 properties to get a proper and safe access to a nearby site. Sir, I appeal to you to refuse this application. I am Bridget Petty. I was first elected in 2019. I have 2 young daughters. Today, I walked one of them to school. She comes up to about here on me, and from September, she will attend the junior school. And like her 9-year-old sister, she will walk up and down Dark Lane daily. With time, I would hope she can start to gain independence, as previous speakers have mentioned, and travel independently down that road. This scheme has so many safety concerns that I don't trust that it wouldn't put her life at risk. I appeal to your common sense. I'm not a transport expert, but I have listened to the valid concerns of the community. I will discuss a number of these issues. The access road has poor visibility that can't be resolved by something the applicant has control over. The road is too fast to be safe. Driveways and turnings make it difficult to create crossing points in the right place and speed bumps that won't seriously impact neighbouring properties. So I query if proposed solutions are actually deliverable. The access route. The access route, the new entry to site, would break up a well-used pedestrian route to school, as identified by a number of speakers. Hundreds of families use it, residents of all ages and abilities, and was recognised by those also with disabilities. Due to the nature of the village, with an infant school in one location and a juniors in another, parents must walk younger children under 7 years both up and down to drop off the junior age first. This entry would break that up. The applicant does not have control over the visibility they need to achieve to make this access point viable. They rely on third-party land to deliver it. They have said that the local authority could ask neighbouring properties to cut back hedges. That, I seriously doubt, would provide the suitable splay lines. But in reality, the local authority is very financially strained, and the area officer left in September. So what confidence should we take in that? I am concerned about the additional resource burden on the local authority that doesn't have the capacity to actually deliver. As I understand, design work for highways should be to design out risk and then mitigate it. I worry that the applicant is unable to design out the risk for this site. The option being proposed only offer visibilities for 20 miles an hour speed limits, and on their basis that traffic calming will be provided. But relying on speed reductions to provide safe access is not a certainty, and many of us have doubts about the deliverability. There are measures in place now, but they fail to reduce speeds. There are signs that say 20 miles an hour now, but they don't take the speeds down, and there are narrowing on the road, and they aren't working. Not the latest data, but the police report of 2022 said that when they monitored 103 vehicles passed at 25 miles an hour or more. There was a range of 25 miles an hour to 44 miles an hour, 51% of the vehicles passing. The author was also shocked to observe 2 at 36 miles an hour and 1 at 44 miles an hour. So the 20 mile an hour speed limit can be described as a complete failure at this time. And if the intention was to drive the speed down to an average of 25 miles an hour. The Highways Authority has not said that the scheme is safe. The Planning Committee in December debated this application for an hour when discussed, and they came back, and coming round to the wording that Neil shared earlier, from the NPPF, paragraph 116, development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. And I'd argue that that unacceptable impact is present here. Another issue that hasn't been discussed is the sustainable transport surface that is described in the SIL compliance statement. There is a reference to surface improvements for public right-of-way. I have serious doubts that the proposal ensures year-round use. I use those fields and the path to enter the A370, and for much of the year it is impassable with mud and drainage issues. This is proposed as a sustainable transport route to reach bus stops. However, this is required to cut across neighbouring local green space. And I don't believe that that is deliverable given current restrictions. Do they expect a 70-year-old to get off the bus and use a poorly lit and uneven path? Would our teenagers feel safe? Those who have children wouldn't look to put on wellies time and again to get their children to school, so this is not fit for purpose. There are areas of concern in ecology that are yet to be fully resolved, if they are even resolvable. The loss of pasture land has been detrimental in impact on the North Somerset area, Mendip Bat area. The appellant has not been managing the land for grazing, which had been a requirement of a previous planning application. It is very concerning and worrying. Based on this information, I ask you, sir, to consider if the balance is really to continue with this application or that the outstanding issues are not able to be resolved safely. These details must be finalised, and we cannot risk allowing this to go ahead as it stands. Thank you.
Any questions?
If I may, Councillor, good afternoon. Can I just be clear, please? You were the person who suggested the proposed mitigation or traffic calming. That's right, isn't it?
So what happened in December was we had a planning committee and there was a lot of debate about road safety. And at that meeting, there was discussion that said the current proposals from the applicant were really not going to be sufficient to slow down SUVs, motorbikes and HGVs on this road. And so I came away feeling frustrated and very concerned. And so I suggested I speak to some residents, and I took some of those resident suggestions and put them down on paper. But at no time did I say that I was a transport expert. I said, I think we have some issues that still need resolving. Could any of these work? and it's fair to say that they got taken at a running pace as though I had some more qualifications than I do. But it was not suggested that they were a final design. It was suggested that what we had in front of us at that time was not sufficient and that there should be room for improvements, given the planning committee had at that time voted in the way they did.
Okay, I'll just try that again. You did suggest those changes, didn't you?
I put forward that the current plan in front of us was not sufficient, and so I took information from how our community uses those roads and looked to seek improvements, because what was provided by the applicant was not sufficient.
Yeah. So you suggested some improvements.
Sure.
And the improvements that we're looking at in this case now are the ones that you suggested, aren't they?
But that's the thing, is that I
that's
don't
a
know
yes.
why they...
I think-
I don't want to say yes, because I don't want to say that I'm good at designing road designs, because I'm not qualified to do that.
I'm not saying you are good at
And
designing
that's what makes me a bit
roads.
worried.
No, I'm not saying you are good at designing roads. All I'm saying is, just for the inspector's note, you spoke to some residents, you spoke to members of your community, and those are the proposals that you suggested. That is correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, did anyone else want to speak? It wasn't on that list. No. Okay, what we'll do now is we'll have a short 10-minute break. Allow the Independence Highways witness to set up, which will just be over there. Okay, so we'll adjourn now until 10 to 3.
an access design, which is largely consistent with what you have before you today, in that it has a 6-metre access road, eventually narrowing down to 5.5 in accordance with North Somerset Council standards. But what it proposed was to narrow Dark Lane by 0.5 metres, which allowed the give-way line of the site access to come forward by that same amount, 0.5 metres. And the reason why we proposed that was because of the speed surveys that we undertook, which indicated that the 85th percentile speeds were higher than the posted 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. So bringing the carriageway or the give-way line forward by 0.5 metre allowed us to achieve the visibility displays in accordance with the 85th percentile speeds.
Now, that seems like a fairly sensible thing to do, really. You've got an entrance and you want to achieve good visibility, so you bring it forward, and then those exiting from the access way, from the 125 houses, they can see up and down the road, yes?
Correct.
Yeah. So why isn't that the proposal now, then? So
once consultation comments were received, both from local residents and indeed the Highway Authority, the proposal to reduce the width of Dark Lane was quite clear quite early that would be objected to.
By who?
By all parties, but certainly the Highway Authority.
Okay, and by local residents as well?
Indeed.
Yeah. Why? Why were they objecting to the narrowing of the carriageway to deliver good visibility at the road junction?
Yeah, well, and it does have merits, I believe, no more so than widening the footway in that location. So we have an existing 1.5 metre footway. The narrowing of the Dark Lane carriageway allowed us to provide a 2 metre footway in that location. However, the concern was in respect of existing traffic on Dark Lane and specifically the HGVs passing.
Yeah, now that seems curious, to put it mildly, because at the point where they cross the access road, what you're saying is, and for a little bit back, you could widen the pavement, is that right?
Correct, yes.
So more pedestrian space, I suppose, for the school children or their scooters and so on, and better visibility for the drivers. But there's an objection because there's a desire to preserve lorry movements or the freedom of lorry movements. Why? What was the priority about the lorry drivers?
Well, yes, that's the question. I personally would have prioritised pedestrian movements over the vehicles. But at 5.2 metres, it's true that 2 HGVs can't pass at that width, whereas they can at 5.5, or indeed the existing width of 5.7.
Yeah, so the carriageway width at the moment on Dark Lane in that location is how wide?
It's 5.7 metres.
5.7. Can 2 HGVs pass that?
They can, yes.
Yeah. If you reduce it by 0.5 metre, it's 5.2. What's the situation then?
At which point 2 HGVs can't pass. This is in accordance with Manual for Streets. It is wide enough for a car and a HGV to pass at those widths.
Yeah. Why does the local highway authority want to ensure 2 HGVs can pass each other on this road?
Well, HGVs are present travelling along the road.
Okay. What's the current arrangement with the cars? Is it that the cars park on the road in places and prevent 2 HGVs passing each other?
Yeah, it is, and that was part of my thinking in terms of proposing that reduction, in that whilst the reduction doesn't allow 2 HGVs to pass, that's an existing arrangement whereby, because of the parked cars, you already have that informal giveaway working.
Yeah, and a consequence of when a lorry has to stop to its overall speed up and down the road is what?
Well, reduced speeds are beneficial from a safety perspective.
Yeah. Well, the local highway authority didn't think that was a good idea. They wanted to ensure there was adequate width for 2 lorries to pass, so they obviously think it's a suitable route and an appropriate route for lorries. What might lie behind that is what we heard today, which is that the alternative routes, which are Church Lane East and West, are inferior. Do you agree with that? Are they inferior routes?
I would agree in respect of Church Lane East, the character of Church Lane East is different. I would not necessarily agree for Church Lane West as we're naming it. I'd say Church Lane West was comparable with Dark Lane.
Yeah. As it stands, though, the local residents' view, the councillor's view, was expressed that the Dark Lane was probably the preferable of the three from their perspective. So, and HGVs need to get to these locations, so that's the one that's being used. If we focus on that, then what happened next, in the sense that they're not allowing you to narrow the carriageway and prioritise pedestrians in that way? So where did you go from there?
So at that point, option 2 was presented.
Yeah.
Option 2 was to retain Dark Lane at its current width. So no narrowing, no changes to the width of Dark Lane, so that's 5.7 metres. At which point, recognising the data that we collected in the analysis that we undertook, it's necessary to bring the vehicle speeds down. We presented, and as has been proven to be the case, hence the removal of the Highway Authority objection, a scheme that is compliant with North Somerset Council Highway Design Guide, and indeed in respect of visibility displays in accordance with 20 miles an hour, which is the posted speed limit.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you do then?
What did we do? So, well, we moved the junction back to the existing curb line.
Yeah, and
that's effective.
That's where it is now, yes?
That's where it is now. But sorry, and accompanying that access proposal was a proposal for traffic calming to bring those speeds down to the 20 miles an hour.
Okay, so why do that? Because there's already some traffic calming, and people say, well, that's not fully effective. Why more of the same?
Well, the speed surveys prove that the existing link and the existing measures aren't effective.
Are not effective.
Not effective.
Because the 85th percentile speed is not below 20.
Correct. And they vary in either direction. Travelling from south to north, they were 29.5 miles an hour as an 85th percentile speeds.
Yep.
Mean speeds approximately 5 miles less than that. In the other direction, the 85th percentile speeds were about 25 miles an hour. The mean speeds were about 20.
So just on that, the only thing that really sort of complies or goes to compliant is those going up the hill as the mean speed.
Correct.
So half or less, obviously, and half or more. But when we apply the 85th percentile, that's above the 20. And then coming down the hill, the 85th percentile is almost replicating a 30 mile an hour zone. So it's obviously not really working, particularly coming down the hill. Is that fair?
It is. It is.
So why introduce... Well, first of all, how would you describe the current measures seeking to restrict speeds?
Well, the current measures are, in terms of formal measures, we have the speed limit for 1, and that's signed and it's posted, and there are roundels on the ground. At the southern end of Dark Lane, there is a physical measure at the or close to the junction with Church Lane.
That's the narrowing of the carriageway.
That's the narrowing and allows the pedestrians to step forward into the carriageway effectively. But that's it on Dark Lane.
So I've got roundels, I've got the narrowing of the carriageway, and did you say some signs?
And the speed limit signage, yes.
Speed limit signage, okay, all right. So how, if that isn't effective, how are the new measures going to be any more effective?
Because we're proposing vertical deflection to slow traffic.
Now that's the engineer's phrase for what people call speed humps or road humps or cushions, but basically there is a change in the level. And why does this cause people to change their speed?
Yes. So our plan A for the speed calm was speed cushions initially, and they've been proven to be effective traffic calming measures. There's a whole range of guidance in terms of their effectiveness. almost the inspiration for the scheme itself was informed by North Somerset Council's own proposals. North Somerset Council has a active travel set of action plans. There are 7 action plans. One of those 7 action plans is a 20-mile-an-hour action plan. And within that document, it speaks extensively of, 1, the merits of traffic calming, 2, the intention that North Somerset proposed to roll this out across the county, and 3, in which circumstances you use that. And the circumstances there, and it specifically states, I can probably point you to the references.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Are that so it's in my proof of evidence at 4.1.9, but it's also core document E10, which is the NSC 20-mile-an-hour action plan. Page 5, which states 20-mile-an-hour limits can be considered where speeds are between 25 to 30 miles an hour. These locations will require traffic calming measures, either horizontal, for example, chicanes, or vertical, for example, speed cushions. And there's plenty of other references through this same NSC document which talks about the benefits of the 20-mile-an-hour schemes. Creating a safe environment to walk, to wheel, to cycle, enabling active travel through the creation of safe environments, etc. It's all through the document.
Okay, so previously no speed humps, now speed humps. I'm talking about the scheme that was introduced as part of the appeal proposal. Anything else in that scheme? In the
first scheme?
Yeah, not the scheme that is now been consulted upon, but if you like the middle one. If the first one was built out, rejected by the Highway Authority and others. So that scheme consisted of cushions, effectively, inappropriate signage and roundels on the carriage. Is there appropriate signage? I mean, there's already signage.
Repeater signs as necessary. These are detailed points at this stage, but if necessary, traffic signs and indeed roundels. So
more roundels in effect.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and relocated of the existing ones.
Now, here's a point of some significance, perhaps, for the inspector. The council want that road to be with traffic travelling at below 20 miles an hour, yes? Or a maximum of 20, yes?
Yes,
that's
I
their
think anybody
decision,
would disagree with
that's
that.
their signage, yeah. And at the moment, that isn't being achieved.
Correct.
All right? So you have suggested proposals to help reduce the speed, yes? Particularly the vertical deflection, but also further signage, repeater signage, more roundels, yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Has the council suggested any alternative to achieving what is an agreed objective with the residents, because we heard that and I asked a question, the residents, the local highway authority and your clients to try and achieve the 20 miles an hour? Other than those proposals, what has the council suggested anything else?
Well, then we come to Plan B.
Plan B, yeah. And what was the reason for Plan B? We heard, and the councillor accepted that it was her suggestions that she put forward, and those suggestions were then accepted by the council, and the council asked for them to be provided. What did they do different from Plan A?
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly that. We've had consultation comments on Plan A. The comments that came back, specifically those from the ward councillor, which has been established today, were also informed by discussions with local residents. There were a number of suggestions recommended and a helpful plan that was accompanied with the description of those amendments. They were provided to us by North Somerset Council with the recommendation that we take these away and consider them, which indeed we did. And there are merits of the scheme that came before us. Now, the principles are largely the same. It's vertical deflection as per Plan A. However, Plan B, there were a number of other considerations that was brought into play, not only traffic calming. So, for example, we were made aware of a pedestrian desire line for pedestrians, children, to cross from Summerlands, and there's a desire to cross from Summerlands across Dark Lane to the what would be the east side of Dark Lane. And could we accommodate a measure that could we accommodate a raised table in that location that would allow a level access for that crossing manoeuvre? And indeed, there was a similar suggestion at two other locations, which was the site access roads, to include another level crossing, and indeed at the southern end where the existing traffic calming feature is, could that be upgraded to also be a raised table level crossing? And then there were the other comments which we accommodated was in respect of changing the speed cushions to what I would call ramps. There's various terminology for these, but I would call them cushions, tables, or ramps effectively, and the ramps being full width features, i.e. the wheels of the vehicles aren't straddling the cushion.
Yeah. So if I'm in a wide base, a large vehicle like a Land Rover Discovery 4,
Yes.
I can sometimes negotiate those cushions if I line it up correctly by going over the top of the speed hump, and the axle is wide enough to avoid it. What's the benefit of having it across the entire road?
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. So it goes across the full width of the roads. There isn't the channels for the wheels to run alongside.
So if I'm in an HGV or a Discovery or some other large vehicle, I'm not going to be able to effectively ignore the speed hump.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And the council were keen to have that full width, yes?
We believe so. The comments were provided to us with the recommendation that we consider them.
Yeah.
And indeed, subsequent to the submission of that scheme, we've had no objections raised from the higher authority.
No. I mean, who else told you to make it the entire width of the road? Who else was telling you that?
Indeed, the comments came from North Somerset Council.
Okay, so they're coming from the council. The council say do that. You've done that. So Plan B is effectively more effective, more substantial cushions, yes? Ramps.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What about the crossing points being at grade? So pedestrians crossing either the access way or the new crossing over Dark Lane, therefore don't have to step into the road. When were they introduced? Do they sit with the full width cushions? Are they part of the same thing, different? How does it all work?
So they came as part of the revised traffic calming scheme. So the latest iteration, they were proposed at that stage.
Yeah. And do they work together? For example, we looked at the cushion that is effectively the crossing point as well. It was agreed in cross-examination with the residents' highway engineer that they had the beneficial effect of slowing down vehicles, but also giving pedestrians the opportunity to cross at grade. Do you agree with that? Is it a symbiotic relationship?
Yes, absolutely. There was, I felt from having been alerted to the desire line and the inadequacy of the existing arrangement, I felt it offered some betterment upon that.
Okay, good. I'm obviously going to deal with each of the residents and the experts' points in due course, but that scheme is the one that's been consulted upon, is that right?
Correct.
Yes. And it was agreed, we'll deal with it in stages. First of all, do you think that is an appropriate response to trying to reduce the speeds on Dark Lane?
Yes, absolutely. And the guidance, one of the core documents, LTN 0107, traffic calming, backs that up.
Yeah. Now, the council's position appears to be, whilst not objecting, that there's a continual review and evolution. So, if we continue to get 21 miles an hour, has to be reviewed again, maybe more cushions. If it still doesn't go down to below 20, we might have further measures and so on. How appropriate is it when you're seeking planning permission to sort of have a continually evolving scheme until you achieve a particular speed when you're already introducing measures that are betterment. I mean, how reasonable and realistic is that to have a continually evolving proposal?
No, I don't think it's reasonable, especially given the evolution that's happened already. And indeed, there is a next stage of evolution as well, at detailed design stage, such that we, as engineers and transport planners and highway experts, have confidence in the scheme that we are proposing now, and in the detail that will follow.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine a situation, government wants to build a new motorway, and Highways England says, well, you can only do that if everybody in the outside lane is travelling at 69 miles an hour. And until you achieve that, you've got to introduce all kinds of measures to do that. I mean, is that a reasonable approach, a continual evolution, even if there are infringements of the traffic speed?
No, clearly not. I mean, that's why we have, the check and challenge process of planning, and indeed the road safety audits and the detailed design, is to ensure that the scheme will be effective once implemented.
Have you seen from any councillor, any ward councillor, any resident, or the expert from acting on behalf of the residents providing any alternative scheme to achieve the objectives that your scheme seeks to achieve?
No.
No. The only other suggestion we had was a speed camera. So get rid of all the speed cushions, and instead what we'll have is a speed camera. Just talk me through how and when speed cameras can be introduced, please. Because the concern is that's a way of avoiding the speed humps and therefore avoiding any noise of something clunking in the back of the lorry.
Yeah. So my understanding of when speed cameras are installed is it's all to do with the identification of accident hotspots, and for speed cameras to be installed in locations where they've been identified, and to resolve that accident issue.
Do we have any evidence of that here?
Well, the evidence tells us that there aren't and haven't been any accidents along Dark Lane. There have been none in the 7-year review period that we presented at planning application stage, and as in preparation for this appeal, we took a deeper dive in terms of the history, and indeed in the 25 years of records that we have, there are no incidents involving pedestrians along Dark Lane across the full length. There was one incident that took place in 2006, and that was vehicle to vehicle.
Okay, so, I mean, one accident on this road, recorded accident on this road in a 25-year period. Does that suggest an accident problem?
No, absolutely not. And indeed, we only identified that one vehicle because we took, or that one incident because we took that deeper dive. The standards advise that we actually assess 5 years where there's a known accident issue, 3 years typically, and there's none in that time.
Yeah, so any justification for a camera that you are aware of?
It's not justifiable.
No. Okay. Right. The first thing that helps us with the evolution of that, and of course, it goes without saying, the Highway Authority don't object, the local planning authority don't object, no statutory consultee objects. Let's deal then, please, with the evidence that was provided by the expert on behalf of the residents group, and that is Mr. Brandt. Okay, now Mr. Brandt has provided his comments in respect of the access arrangements, and you've seen his representations at the application and appeal stage, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. You deal in your proof of evidence with the evolution and the basis of what you've designed in this case. So as far as most of his points, they're addressed in your proof, is that right?
Yes, I believe so. The content of the proof, it's quite difficult preparing it because we didn't have any objections from the local highway authority, yeah. And often our proof of evidence is focused on those objections. Further consultation comments have arisen since, but yeah, I believe they're largely covered.
Yeah, because you set out in your proof of evidence, obviously, the position of the county council, which is not an objection. You look at highway capacity, obviously that's not an issue. Section 4 of your proof is about highway safety, and talk about Dark Lane provides access for the primary school for many children in Backwell who are encouraged to walk either alone or with carers, also used by the secondary school children and so on. So you are alive to the concerns that residents have, and your proof deals with that from page 6 onwards. Is that right?
Yes, indeed, and the preceding technical submissions that we made through the planning application process.
Yeah, and when I go to 4.1.10, for example, you deal with the 20-mile-an-hour action plan policy, and 4.1.15, you deal with the access junction and the visibility display that's required and so on. So these points are dealt with, aren't they, in there?
They are, yes.
Yeah. However, we've got a new note from Mr. Brandt, and if you could, I don't know, have you got a copy of that, or no? I've got. If I read out the points that he makes, and then I'll just get you to respond. For your notes, it was obviously on instructions that I put the point that we'll put in cross-examination to Mr. Brandt. Right, what he says is that at 1.9, a single point of access is being proposed, that being from Dark Lane. In order to create an access, it is proposed to demolish 23 Dark Lane and have only a short section of frontage on the public highway. This limits the ability to achieve a technically compliant junction layout, specifically with regards to pedestrians and vehicular sight lines. The original submitted access proposal was subject to road safety audit. So is that right? The original proposals were subject to road safety audit?
Yes, they were.
Were the amended proposals subject to a road safety audit?
Yes.
And just talk me through that process, if you will, please, because, as I said, it's something I've never seen before, which is that a road safety audit is asked for. It's then the subject of, obviously, an independent audit, and then you provide your comments in response. In this case, for this authority, there's another 2 stages to that process. What are they?
Yeah, so in terms of the overall process, we prepare a design, and that gets submitted to an independent road safety expert for them to undertake a safety audit of the scheme. At this stage, we are undertaking a stage 1, which is effectively conceptual design. Stage 2 follows post-consent detailed design.
Okay.
The road safety audit is undertaken by the safety expert, the independent expert. It then comes back to the designer for designer comments, and those designer comments and the full document is then submitted to the local highway authority for their overseeing organisation comments and approval. Yeah,
now that's the bit that I'm not used to, I have to say, because this authority has that as a procedure, don't they? They like to go through and provide their comments on your comments as the designer's response to the road safety audit, yes?
They do. That's not abnormal. It is in accordance with the road safety audit guidance. I'll just say that it's not often applied as rigidly as North Somerset apply it, in my experience.
Thank you, and you're right to correct me. So the position is we've got 3, effectively, highway experts looking at this. Is that right? There's you, there's the safety auditor, and then there's the local authorities highway people.
Yeah,
or
but
have I got that wrong?
Correct. There's probably more than that, because the safety auditor is accompanied by a team member.
Okay.
So there's 2 auditors that attend site. North Somerset Council safety officers are invited to attend that site visit as well. It wasn't. They chose not to join on this occasion. It then gets submitted, and within North Somerset Council, you have the Highways and Transport Development Management team, and you also have the safety officers and the safety team. So there's probably a number more, at least 4 parties involved there, possibly 5.
Okay. So we've got all these engineers looking at it, and you can see the responses that have been provided, and so on. I don't know if we provided you with that, sir. Have you received the road safety audit report?
So was this the one emailed this morning?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got that.
Yeah. Do you want a hard copy, or are you fine with?
I'm fine working with the copy I've got.
Thank you. And then there's another document that I've seen, which I think is your response to these responses. Is that right?
Not quite, almost.
Okay.
So we have the safety audits undertaken by the independent experts. As designer, I then provide my designer's response. That document has been submitted to North Somerset Council.
Yeah.
What we received yesterday was effectively North Somerset Council's interim comments from their safety engineer.
Yeah.
So that is effectively Appendix B of the audit. The two combined creates the full and complete audit.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up the document and make sure I understand what I've got physically. I turn to the first page and I've got the details of who was carrying out the project, and then the assessor is RKS, is that right?
So RKS were the road safety auditors, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the road safety audits.
Okay, and it's got a contents page, introduction, issues identified during stage 1 safety audit team statement. So this is a narrative, begins at section 1.1, which sets out the process that they went through, yes?
Correct, yes.
And so, for example, they stay at section 2, issues identified during stage 1 road safety audit, problem, summary, potential collision due to standing water or surface covers. Okay, and it says no details have been provided of surface water drainage. Okay, so have you had to respond to that point?
Indeed, and that's at Appendix B.
Yeah, so what you've done is provide the road safety audit with your comments in response attached. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Appendix A shows what the proposals are, and so for that one, you say agreed details of drainage solutions to be provided at detailed stage, yes?
Yes.
How normal is that, to provide the detailed, at the detailed stage, issues about drainage?
I mean, it's absolutely normal at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, what we need, obviously, is a road with a slight gradient on it, draining to drains, do we, presumably?
Indeed, yeah, and there would be some more technical solutions for the full width features. But this is an outline and conceptual stage. It's a detail that we simply don't have at this time, and that will come at 278, which is when the stage 2 road safety audit takes place.
Yeah. Now, in the Appendix B I've got, it's got 2 columns that don't have any writing in. One is overseeing organisation response. Who is the overseeing organisation?
That's North Somerset Council.
Okay, and then it says agreed RSA action. Who writes in that bit?
Both columns are completed by North Somerset Council.
Okay, so they provide a response to the design organisation's response. That's you, and then they provide a response to RSA's suggestion. Is that right?
Yeah, so they respond to my comments, and then they cap the discussion that's preceded that point with a agreed RSA action, and that's the final column.
Okay. Now there's a document that I've been given, and then I think I've given it up, and that might be my fault. Which is because I don't know if you've got that, sir. The responses from the Highway Authority to the responses in the response to the RSA. I saw it this morning. It was given to me, but it could be anywhere by now. It's another table with further responses. Do you have that?
I've got an electronic copy.
Okay.
We received this last night.
Okay. I think that's it.
So is this Appendix B?
It's the completed Appendix B with the overseeing organisation comments completed.
Okay.
I'm not sure, sir, it's any different ultimately from the final document you've got.
I think there's another stage. So the document you've got, unless the authority added that, do you have, can I just ask you if I may, do you have effectively writing in the last 2 columns?
Yeah, I have overseeing organisation response and agreed RSA action.
Okay, well, Mr. Worsley is absolutely right then. So those columns are filled in. The council has obviously done that in what they've provided. And I think there was an interim position, and then whilst you're giving evidence, I think we've had a final position as well. So there's a further version of this.
Okay.
But I mean, this is pretty exciting for highway engineers. There's been a further response whilst this witness has been giving evidence, is what I'm told. Is that right?
What we've just had through is effectively the signed version of it. So the version that Mr. Young is holding is effectively stamped draft because it was unsigned. Whilst Mr. McHugh has been on the stand, we've had the signed version come through.
Okay, slightly less exciting. It's just been signed, I think.
No, it is exciting. I mean, when it was given to us last night, it was, we hope this is helpful. It's my interim comments. We're just signing this off.
Yeah.
So we were anticipating the full version imminently, and it's just arrived. So.
Yes, and to be fair, your response to the road safety auditor's response had been with the higher authority for most of the last 2 weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly 2 weeks, yes.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Okay, so that's fine. We've got a response. Do they raise any concerns?
No, every response that I've made has been accepted.
Yes. Okay, so if we go back then to the note that's provided by Mr. Brandt, he raised 2 points in respect of, at page 4, about adequate sight lines, okay, or visibility for pedestrians. We're not talking about vehicles here. And his point is, well, I'm surprised that this wasn't picked up by the road safety audit or by the local highway authority. What's your overall observation? We'll turn to each of them in due detail, but what's your overall observation as to why the points he raises aren't dealt with in the road safety audit?
Well, they clearly didn't see it necessary to raise the points.
Yeah. And is that your view? Do you think the points he's raised are good, solid, and fairly expressed concerns, or are they not?
Well, so the point is factual in respect of the achievable visibility. The fact remains that it's an existing situation and that there's betterment achieved through slowing vehicles down at that point, as well as an accessibility perspective through the level access.
Yeah.
And just to add that, you know, there's a detail to follow, at which point, you know, some further amendments can be made if necessary. Okay.
Just to take that in stages, he accepted there was a betterment, and that was acknowledged in terms of the crossing point. And so he makes the point that you've only got 6 metres visibility if you look up the hill as you're crossing from the west to the east. I put to him that there was some existing vegetation there. He said, yes, there is, and it could be removed because it's within the highway. However, he said that isn't how he measured the 6 metres. Any observations on that?
No, it's hard to dispute categorically. My interpretation was that there was vegetation in the highway, the adopted highway.
Yeah.
But it would be a limited amount in terms of the overall effect, I think.
Yeah. His point is, look, I can only see 6 metres from the curb. I can't see 25 metres. What's the answer to the inspector? Obviously, it's a betterment on an existing situation with the raised table and the reduced speeds. So the inspector will obviously acknowledge all of that, but it still doesn't achieve, you know, the 25 metres. So what would you say about that?
No, if you were designing this afresh, if it was a new scheme within the layout, for example, I agree you would design it from 1.5 metres back, and you would design your displays in accordance with the vehicle speeds. The reality is this is an existing situation. Those movements are already happening. I've observed those movements happen, and the reality is what does happen, and has proven to be the case through the accident records, it occurs safely, is that you stand on the curb edge and you look out. So you don't stand 1.5 metres back and then make a choice. And and you can't see, and then you dash across. You stand on the curb edge and you make a choice.
Yeah.
I observe that happening. It's quite common in existing situations.
So where's his 6 metres taken from, please?
I'm guessing it's 1.5 metres.
Yeah. So how realistic is that? When you want to cross the road, you stand 1.5 metres back from the curb, and imagine you can't go forward because there's, I don't know, an invisible wall or something.
Well, indeed. I mean, if your visibility display was unrestricted, you might take that luxury of standing as far back as you want to. Of course, when it is, then you've got to take the necessary steps and you stand on the curb edge.
Okay. You know, let's imagine, for example, I suppose you've got a pram and you're thinking about crossing the road, and so you've got the pram, you might be further behind, and maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's why it's there. But what can people do in a low-speed environment to check whether it's safe to cross the road?
Yeah. Well, I will answer that. Of course, it's already happening, and at the moment they've got a curb to have to push the pram down and up unless they're crossing onto a driveway. And in that scenario, they will be positioning the pram alongside the curb, and they'll be stood behind the pram looking. And then they've got to make the choice to bump the pram down and cross the road. That same positioning will happen in the arrangement as it's shown, but of course you haven't got the curb to negotiate at that point either. And of course the cars are going slower too as they approach the ramp and have to mount it.
Now, in terms of desire lines, how strong a desire line is it for the residents from our proposal to cross the road at that point?
I would say it's not essential at all to use it.
No. It goes off to a small number of houses and then an alleyway through, I think, to...
So eventually you can cut through to the A370 at a point west of the Backwell crossroads. Yeah. If you felt unsafe using that junction, your alternative is to continue along the A370 and use the signalised crossings at the crossroads.
Yeah. So you've got an alternative. It's not a strong desire line, you've said, and yet we're providing it. Why are we providing it then if it's not really for our residents? Who's asked us to provide it?
That came from the comments that we received from North Somerset Council.
Yeah. In the process of what the ward councillor wanted, or what the...
Sorry, yes. Yeah, so they were the comments provided by the ward councillor to North Somerset Council.
Who explained that she's spoken to some local people and they'd suggested, obviously, that. So here we are, providing a crossing point that we don't need to provide, that's been asked for by the ward councillor, who now says, well, I'm not qualified to tell you what I think we need, and you've gone and provided it, and now it's the subject of criticism, not from the Highway Authority, not from the Road Safety Audit, but it is from Mr. Brandt, okay? Of course, the option exists not to provide it, and if we didn't provide it, would that make this scheme unacceptable in planning terms?
No, indeed, the Plan A scheme had speed cushions instead.
Yes. It might be said, well, we can do that, we just remove that. We don't need to make a rod for our own back, as it were, or persimmon don't need to do that. The alternative is to say, okay, well, this will be an improvement and will be a betterment. Why? Why provide it? Why is it a betterment? Why should the inspector take it into account? And why have we gone to so much trouble to try and accommodate it? What's the benefit of it?
As you say, there isn't really a benefit for the residents of our site.
Yeah. So who are the beneficiaries?
It's existing users.
Yeah. Who apparently, some of them wanted it. And what does it do for them that is beneficial and assists them?
Yeah. So there's a number of points there. It slows traffic down, first of all. So in respect of the visibility displays, the vehicles approaching that point of crossing, which is an existing demand, the vehicles at that point are slowed down.
Yeah.
And then two, it's the raised table so that you have a level crossing. So the carriageway is raised to the same level as the footways, and so you don't have the stepped or the reduced or the the change in level.
Yeah, or if you've got a pram, it's easier to cross, isn't it?
It is,
or a
yeah.
mobility scooter or a wheelchair.
Or wheelchair, yes.
Yeah. So we're improving that for all types of people, all types of users, including the vulnerable and those with mobility problems and wheelchairs, providing all of that. What about the surface of it? Can the surface at the detailed stage be a different colour, a different set of materials? How could it be treated?
Yeah, well, of course it can, yes. It's a detailed point at that stage, but the surfacing can be amended, and you often see that, yeah.
Yeah. The visibility is what it is. We know the cars don't park on the west side. I'm just thinking about somebody crossing from west to east. And then east to west, again, it's agreed the cars are in the parking bays, so they're further back, and wasn't actually complained about. The visibility from going east to west. There wasn't a complaint about visibility either up or down the lane, as I understand it. And there isn't a complaint going west to east, looking down the lane. It is just going west to east, looking up the lane. Is that right?
Looking south, yes.
You're looking south, yeah, sorry. I'm topographically up, but yes.
Correct, yes.
Looking south is better. So that's the only thing. And it physically is what it is that right?
Yeah. If we keep the curb lines at the existing alignment.
Yeah, and you could have built out the pedestrian access and you could narrow the road, but the council don't want that because they want to make sure the lorries can pass each other.
That's the reason why I didn't propose it.
Yeah. Okay, all right. The other point that he makes was the laws of physics point, as I put it, which is that you're trying to cross from one side of the pavement, one side of the access road to the other, across the pavements, and my point was you don't need to see 20 metres to your left because that's somebody's garden and a house. You look over your shoulder and there's traffic coming there. Can I start with the basics, please? He's talking about visibility for a pedestrian crossing at a junction. What are the rules and regulations surrounding that, please?
Yeah. And yes, that is what we're talking about. And it's about really the positioning of where the pedestrians will cross. If you cross along the give-way line, then you are continuing straight ahead, if you will, on the footway. Or alternatively, you can, as a pedestrian, move slightly around the radius of the bell mouth and cross as well. Your walking distance is slightly reduced in terms of crossing the roads, but you're off your desire line at that point. And indeed, when you're crossing the roads, you're looking in both directions. You're looking down the site access, or indeed for any approaching vehicles that might be turning in.
Okay, so what do I need to do? The suggestion is that this is unsafe. This proposal, 125 houses should be refused on the basis of people crossing at that point, presumably because it's unsafe. It's a highway safety issue justifying refusal of this proposal. Not a concern for the Highway Authority, not a concern for the road safety auditor, not a concern for you, is a concern for him. It's a showstopper for the whole development, in effect. What has he got wrong?
So the points I disagreed with was in respect of what Mr. Brandt referred to as the design speed. Now, you have a 20 mile an hour limit, but your design speed at a T-junction isn't 20 miles an hour.
No. Why is it that we don't treat a speeds at a T-junction as 20 miles an hour?
Well, I mean, cars simply aren't going to be driving at 20 miles an hour going around a T-junction in either direction, whether you're coming out of the site access or indeed driving into it.
Yeah. Is this a good point that he raises or not?
I disagree with the design speed point around the junction.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a sensible suggestion to suggest you need to be designing to a 20 mile an hour speed limit for somebody turning a junction in two 20 mile an hour roads. It doesn't seem to make sense. Is that right? Has he just got the wrong end of the stick?
The interjection point, which is the junction, vehicles are travelling on much slower speeds. The highway code requires that drivers approach junctions carefully. There's been a recent change in the highway code in respect of pedestrian priority, such that drivers need to approach a junction now anticipating a pedestrian to be in the carriageway. The design speed at a junction is limited, 5 miles an hour, I would say. Now, we have got intervisibility display plans included within my proof of evidence,
Yep.
which themselves were also provided in TN03, submitted at prior to...
When you say TN, you mean technical notes.
Sorry.
So it's not a government technical note,
Correct.
it's yours, is that right?
Technical Note 03, which was responding to consultation comments, so yeah, an Apex produced document. And that provided intervisibility displays, particularly for HGVs, but they apply equally to cars too, which shows sufficient intervisibility when you approach the junction and the ability to look down the access road before you start making the turn.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I think you said the interjection point. Did I say that? Did I get that right? What was the phrase?
I did use that, but
Yes.
junction.
So
the giveaway
the
line,
interjection
yeah.
point is the junction, and obviously, in the real world, people slow down when they get to the junction, or if they're turning through the junction. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not designing a 25-mile visibility display. If you're crossing at the junction, I mean, the diagrams I've seen have shown that as a crossing point. His point was, Mr. Brandt's point was, forgive me, was to say, well, that's part of the ramp, so people wouldn't cross at that point. Your observations on that?
Yeah, and so we do have a couple of plans. We have the access general arrangement plan.
Yeah.
And then supplementary to that, we have the traffic calming scheme. The traffic calming scheme has evolved. The site access plan, less so. There probably is some in terms of tying the two plans together, there might be some, in terms of where the tactile pavings are located, slightly off maybe. The original site access plan had your tactile pavings going across the giveaway line.
Yeah.
And at that point, as a pedestrian, you look over your shoulder, as you've described. The traffic calming scheme that evolved following the comments that we received, then introduced a raised tabletop, which indeed has a ramp. I would agree that ramp is probably about a metre back from the giveaway.
Yeah.
The tactile pavings, in terms of the position upon that ramp, well, the detail of that ramp is a detailed point.
I mean, the precise location of where it goes and the gradients and that's
exactly, and indeed where the tactile paving is located upon that ramp also is a detailed point. The reality is, and once we get through to that detailed discussions with North Somerset Council and indeed the Stage 2 road safety audit, yes, you'll probably move that tactile paving as close to that ramp as possible. And indeed, if that's 1 metre back, the footways are 1.5 metres, you've got the full, you've got full visibility of dark lane at that point.
Yeah, and then you look over your shoulder and will you be able to see up the road?
Indeed.
Yeah. I think there's a suggestion of another crossing point further in up the access way. Is that right or not?
So the traffic calming scheme probably incorrectly shows a tactile paving, which is meant to be just indicative, probably further around the junction than it will actually be.
Okay, so that sort of 5 metres that he was talking about, we don't need to trouble ourselves with, because in truth, it will presumably be at the point where the surface top of the ramp is flush with the pavement. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So do we need to trouble ourselves with the idea of sight lines extending to the left that go into other people's gardens where there won't be traffic?
No.
No. Okay. It says sight lines in the direction of dark lane equating to 5 miles per hour as opposed to 20, which is the more appropriate speed to be thinking about desire lines at that point.
Sorry, which is the...
In his, sorry, you haven't got it in front of you. My fault. His second point is both proposed pedestrian crossing points on the access, on the site access, so he's saying 2, shown by the tactile paving on the appellant's drawing, and I think you've said in effect there'd be 1. Is that right?
So, yes, there will be 1. There'll be two tactile pavings on both sides of the carriageway.
Okay.
They are indicatively shown at the moment. The reality is they will be positioned at the start of the ramp at the top of the top of the ramp rather.
Have sight lines in the direction of dark lane equating to speeds of 5 miles an hour, whereas the requirement is for 20. What's your view on that?
So the requirement isn't for 20 miles an hour because vehicles won't be travelling at that speed as they turn in or out of the junction. And indeed, the achievable visibility display is far greater when you move those tactiles closer to the ramp.
Yeah, okay. So have you designed it for 5 miles an hour? Does it achieve more than the visibility for sight line for 5 miles an hour? Or what does the inspector take away as the sort of visibility distance that you've, or speed and distance?
Yeah, so again, this is, in terms of the exact placement of the tactile pavings, it's a detailed point. We haven't plotted the vis displays for the pedestrians.
But assuming it's sort of on the top of the speed cushion, if you like, or the crossing point, assuming that, what sort of speed and distance have you designed to?
Well, at that point, it's a metre in, and bear in mind, at 2.4 metres in, at the centre of the access, you're going to achieve 25 metres. You'll have greater visibility as a pedestrian 1 metre into the footway, effectively.
Okay, it's my fault and I've not been clear. He's suggesting you've designed this for 5 miles an hour instead of 20 miles an hour, okay? And he says you should be designing to 20 miles an hour at the point where they're crossing. What observations do you have to make about that? He's offered 2 speeds. Yeah. What observations do you make about that?
Sorry, I misunderstood. You should be designing for a much lower speed, and I would say 5 miles an hour would be appropriate.
So his criticism about 5 miles an hour is met with your answer, well, that's right, because 5 miles an hour is an appropriate speed at that junction.
I would agree. You'd be almost at a stop coming out of the site access, and you'd be travelling at a much reduced speed turning in.
And the second point is, well, he assumes it's 5 metres in. He's looked at the drawings. I don't want to be critical if they're showing it there, but in truth, it would be much nearer to the junction, yes?
Yes.
And achieving, therefore, a position which is closer to the junction, lower vehicle speed, and better visibility. Is that right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So is there a concern here about the sight lines?
No.
No. And have the road safety auditors or the local highway authority identified that as a problem?
No.
No. Good. And why do you think that is? Why do you think they haven't identified it as a problem?
Because it's achievable and it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, now we've got a whole series of points that were raised by residents, and I just want to take the time to go through those. So I don't know, if I go through, I've got each of these statements. We've dealt with the bulk of it, but there are a few points. Are you happy for me to go through those now? Yeah, okay. All right. So we had the lady who was effectively dialing in from home, and she was raising concerns about how it is for those who are using a wheelchair and the safety of all pedestrians and those using wheelchairs. What's your answer to that? Because she had very specific concerns and she was raising concerns about safety. So do you have any observations?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the lady who called in. We have standards to adhere to. Those standards from a highway perspective are so designed such that vulnerable road users, school children, people in wheelchairs are appropriately accommodated. We've got an access design that's entirely compliant with North Somerset Council's highway design guides.
Yep.
North Somerset Council has duties under the Equalities Act 2010 for its own policies and design guides to be compliant with that. North Somerset Council's 20 mile an hour action plan indeed references its duties under the Equalities Act as a reason as to why it's implementing the 20 mile an hour action plan. And so we're designing a scheme that is suitable and suitable for all users and in accordance with all the design standards. And indeed, I can quote various references whereby benefit is probably achieved through the design that we've implemented. If we go to LTN 017, for example, which is one of the core documents, traffic calming scheme. Paragraph 2.7.14, traffic calming can be of great benefit to disabled people, not least by the reduction of traffic speeds. Curb-to-curb flat-top humps would assist wheelchair users when crossing roads. It is important that traffic calming has regard to inclusive design principles. Paragraph 3.2.15, where traffic calming measures would be needed to ensure that speeds are at or below 20 miles an hour. Sorry, let me start that again. 20 mile an hour zone should be used where speed reduction to 20 mph is desirable and where traffic calming measures would be needed to ensure that speeds are at below 20 miles an hour. E.g., roads where 85th percentile speeds exceed 24 miles an hour before calming. And it goes on to say, they can help protect children walking and cycling to and from school and may help to encourage other children to walk or cycle. The DFT government guidance, so core document K6, setting local speed limits, paragraph 94. There is clear evidence of the effect of reducing traffic speeds on the reduction of collisions and casualties, as collision frequency is lower at speeds, and where collisions do occur, there is a lower risk of fatal injury. Research shows that on urban roads with low average traffic speeds, any 1 mile an hour reduction in average speed can reduce the collision frequency by around 6%. And it quotes the research. There is also clear evidence confirming the greater chance of survival of pedestrians in collisions at lower speeds. Inclusive mobility, December 2021, paragraph 4.2, which is also in my evidence at 4.1.3, discusses footways and footpaths. They should be made as wide as practicable, but under normal circumstances, a width of 2 metres is the minimum that should be provided, as this allows enough space for 2 wheelchairs to pass, even if they are using larger electric mobility scooters. If this is not feasible due to physical constraints, then the minimum width of 1.5 metres would be regarded as the minimum acceptable under most circumstances, as this should enable a wheelchair user and a walker to pass each other. I can go on. The North Somerset Council 20 mile an hour action plan references a whole load of benefits in terms of the introducing that reduction in speeds. Page 5, for example, 20 mile an hour limits. Page 5. The reduction in speed seeks to achieve improvements in road safety. Particularly the benefits of the introduction of 20 miles an hour can be realised in enabling active travel through the creation of safe environments for people to walk and cycle. And to cap the point, whilst I hear the comments and the points made, I believe that the design that we presented is entirely compliant. In fact, you don't need to take my word for it. It's common ground with North Somerset Council that our design is entirely compliant with their own standards.
Yeah, you mentioned there curb-to-curb speed reduction measures. So is that which help disabled people? We can understand why, because of course you can just take your wheelchair from one curb to the other.
Yes.
Is that what's being achieved here?
It is, yes.
So I appreciate some of the local people will say, well, we're going to hear more lorry noise because you've got these speed humps, and of course the lorries with their wide axles won't be able to just ride over the humps, so they are going to have to negotiate the hump, and that is going to potentially create some noise depending on what's in the back of the wagon. Sorry, lorry. Okay. So a counterbalance to that is, of course, it's going to make it easier for pedestrians and easier for wheelchair users to cross the road. Who should take priority, please?
Absolutely, the pedestrians.
Yeah. So, yes, people might get a bit more noise, but if it makes it easier for that lady to cross the road, is that a better priority?
Yes, I agree, but I'd also add in respect of the noise. Yes, inevitably there probably is a noise implication. It's impossible to say exactly what that noise might be because it's subject to a whole lot of detail in terms of the size of the features, the materials that are used. But what I would say is that there's a counterpoint there, and it's indeed in LTN 017 traffic calming. It's not a given that in all circumstances there would be an increase in noise, reducing speeds and creating an environment where vehicles are travelling at a consistently lower speed. That reduces noise, and so there's a counterbalance there in terms of the noise effect.
Okay, all right. I want to then deal with Councillor Barbara Harland's point. She's a parish councillor, and what Barbara says is that it would be a serious risk to highway safety. She accepted that she's not an expert, but she was raising concern about road safety on Dart Lane. She says it's already an issue and therefore not the responsibility of the developer. And when I asked her a few questions, she did acknowledge that she felt that Dart Lane was already unsafe. Okay, to what extent is a developer such as Persimmon Homes, Charles Church, required to effectively address existing issues?
So in accordance with MPPF, the developer is required to mitigate its impacts, and you assess the severity of those impacts upon that baseline situation. Effectively, how do we change that situation?
She also says that in a letter to a resident suggesting that the mitigation scheme first mooted by the parish council, and she said that was wrong. We've obviously heard from the ward councillor, so is that right? The source of the information is really the ward councillor?
Yeah, we believe so. That was a misunderstanding at that time.
Okay, no, easily done. And then it was channeled to you, obviously, through the district council or the North Somerset Council.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And she says that the parish council has consistently stated that the traffic calming measures submitted by the appellant during the termination of the planning application to reduce traffic speeds were insufficient to achieve a safe site access. So she's complaining that what was done during the application stage was insufficient. Have you gone on to provide something which is more significant, please?
Indeed, that's the Plan B scheme.
Yeah. So in addressing that concern about inadequacy of initial measures, have you addressed that?
Well, I wouldn't agree that the Plan A scheme was inadequate for starters. I think it is appropriate, and I think it would be effective. But indeed, we have taken on board the comments that have come to us in the consultation stage and reflected those in the Plan B scheme.
Yeah. Okay. And she says the parish council has recognised the attempts made by the appellant to improve upon the traffic calming measure. However, it has had no part in drafting the revised scheme. So she's effectively distinguishing any ownership from it or any responsibility for it, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. She says, for us, these outstanding road safety issues are not matters of design detail which can be deferred to later, but whether a safe access to the development at all can be achieved. You've explained why it's betterment. Have you seen any alternative suggested by Barbara or anybody else?
No.
No. Okay. Next up, we had Rachel Betterson, and Rachel showed us some videos, a 34-second video where she said there's a real concern through lack of visibility that we're putting increased safety risk to pedestrians and drivers. I believe this access is unworkable. I think she was showing school children in that location. Your observations on that, please?
Yeah, so there's 2 points there, isn't there? There's the site access and the visibility displays, and indeed the use of the footways. So, as I've discussed, and as is common ground with North Somerset Council, the access is designed to standards. The video that was shown is the existing situation, and that isn't reflective of what the situation will be when the access is built. There's 2 key points there. There is the vegetation on the boundary, and that can be legally and legitimately cut back to the highway boundary edge, which is what we're proposing to do. And indeed, there is a telegraph pole. So this is, sorry, the video was looking north at the access.
Yep.
And so the vegetation there can be cut back to the highway boundary, and there's a telegraph pole that will be repositioned. And both of those points obscure visibility in the current situation.
Okay. And then the second video was the site access school. So it says, please play second video at the site access school closure for 4 seconds. It says the second video shows children coming past the same proposed side entrance in the busy, exciting and distracted way that children do. I think this speaks for itself. And I think that was, yeah, your observations on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the children were walking on the footway, as they'll continue to do. The junction is designed in accordance with the standards. Those children will be walking along Dark Lane as part of a wider journey. The only children that probably don't need to cross a road currently will be those that live on Dark Lane, north of the junction. All others will be crossing a road to get to that point. It's not introducing a step change from that wider journey, I don't believe.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Next we had Rachel Beckinsale, and Mrs. Beckinsale raised a number of issues about Dark Lane. She said it's a residential street which is moderately busy for much of the day. Do you agree with that? Moderately busy?
Well, it's hard to define what's moderate. What's moderately busy? We know the volumes of traffic. Dark Lane accommodates approximately 2,500 movements per day. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. Moderately busy. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And she talks about the nature of the users. There's obviously lots of reference for HGV. She says there's cut through to the A38, local residents for over 500 houses, school traffic, church traffic, daily street parking. Given that, how significant is the actual increase in volume in traffic that we're proposing?
Yeah, well, the significance reduces given the volume of movements on Dark Lane already. The volume of traffic generated by the development is or will be less than it's often the case. Sorry, let me take a step back. It's often the case that there's a perception that the volume of movements generated by a development will be far higher than they actually are.
Yeah, because people say, well, look, you've got 125 houses, and that will be 125 or 250 cars in the morning.
Indeed, and that's a perception that we hear frequently, but it's not something that materialises in practice.
Yeah, because of course we have people who are working, but some people are not working. Some people are working unusual shifts. Some people are retired. Some people are working later on. Some people are working from home. So, I mean, what is the level of trip generation in the AM peak, please, from this site broadly?
Yep. So our transport assessment presented the trip generation, which was agreed with North Somerset Council, and that had 67 two-way trips in the AM peak hour.
Yeah, that's people coming back. They might have been to the shop, or they might be coming back from work.
So, sorry, this is the AM peak hour?
Yeah. So people might be coming back from work if they've been on a night shift or something like that. That's why it's a two-way movement, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah, but most people, they'll be leaving in the peak hour to go to Bristol, to go to Weston, to go wherever they might work in their vehicle, or take their children to a school or a college or anything.
And it could be the same person undertaking that trip too. They leave the site, they drop their child off at school, and they return again. That can happen. Typically, it is tidal. I can't quite recall, it would be my transport assessment, exactly how many trips, but you might anticipate around about 40 of those, 45 maybe, to be departures, with the residual returning.
Okay.
And similar in the PM, but in reverse.
Yeah, I mean, that's one car less than every minute, isn't it? So,
well, it's yes.
In terms of the cars, I mean the departures. So there's a car leaving the development, and it leaves and it goes through the junction. Maybe it takes a couple of seconds, maybe it takes 10 seconds, and they've got to stop. But then there's nothing for another, 45 seconds. So the ability to cross the access way?
Yeah, it's perfectly passable. It would be unusual to find yourself waiting, more so.
Yeah, the suggestion is that this is unsafe for children. Children can walk up dark lane or down dark lane, and they don't have to cross any entrance access ways, and now they're going to have to, and this is unsafe. Just give me your observations on that. That's a general theme from many people.
Yeah. You almost don't need my comments here. It's agreed, the local highway authority, that it's a safe arrangement. And indeed, there's independent road safety experts that concur with that too.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, in terms of children going to the primary school, which is at the top of the hill, have they got to cross any other junctions?
Yes. Well, I don't know what their wider journey is. Unless they're living on Dark Lane currently, then they will only have one junction, but yes, one junction to cross, which is at the school itself. And then you've got their wider journey, and there will be junctions to cross across that wider journey.
Yeah. Okay, all right. It said that, that's really sort of deals with Mrs. Beckingsale's point about her children. She said, I have a concern over the number of parked cars which will have to be displaced to create the reasonable sight lines for traffic exiting the new junction at number 23. What's your observation there?
Yeah. So there will be the loss of some parking through the physical building of the junction. That's about 2 vehicles in terms of lost on-street parking space. It's only 2 vehicles because there's also a driveway where vehicles can't park in front anyway. There is a requirement to introduce parking restrictions as well, and a contribution has been agreed for North Somerset Council to implement those parking restrictions. So double yellows effectively which I envisage would just be around the Bellmouth and shouldn't contribute much more in terms of loss of parking. That loss of parking, if the concern is about the displacement, if needed, and I think there's a condition which accepts this, that loss of parking can be accommodated within the access road beyond the junction Bellmouth.
Okay. She also complained about the noise. She said, and I quote, even without the speed humps, they are very noisy and early in the morning. So there's obviously a noise issue already. Have we got any suggestion from environmental health or anything that somehow there's going to be an unacceptable noise impact?
No.
No. Yeah, good.
Sorry, I would just add there as well is that North Somerset Council are installing traffic calming schemes across the county in residential areas. There's a recent scheme in Yatton that's been implemented. There's consultation for a scheme in Congresbury, I think, for another scheme, and there are others. And indeed, North Somerset has its 20-mile-an-hour action plan, which proposes, that this is a set of measures that it is introducing across the county. They must be satisfied in all respects that these are effective and the noise issues can be dealt with.
Okay, then we heard from Dr. Katie McCarkan, if I've said that right. I'm sorry if I haven't. And she wrote that the imposition of a 20-mile-an-hour limit is a false reassurance, but when I asked her a few questions, she said, I'm very happy to have it. Have you seen anybody suggest that we should abandon the 20-mile-an-hour zone down Dart Lane?
No.
No. Do people complain that it isn't currently sufficiently effective?
Yes.
They do. So what is the appropriate response to that?
Well, it's a scheme of traffic calming to reduce speeds.
Yeah. She says, I live on the west side or non-pavement side of Dart Lane. My children walk to the end of our drive and are immediately on the road. Their reduced stature means they need to lean out a little to see round garden walls and plants. They have learned that vehicles pass closely and at speed in each direction due to the parking on the other side. I've watched my son and daughter need to step out onto the road to see round parked vehicles. Your observations on that?
Well, one, this is, it's the measure that's, it's happening now. And according to the data that we have, it operates safely, but reduction in vehicle speeds can only help in terms of that crossing.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, what she's describing is common sense experience, isn't it? In a situation where you don't have perfect geometrically designed roads from new, you've got children coming down the driveway and they're applying common sense in a way. That's what she's describing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's the, it's the technique, if you call it that we described in respect of the Summerlin's Junction.
Yeah.
And what's just as a general observation as well is that those properties on the west side of Dark Lane, if the residents of those properties felt unsafe undertaking that manoeuvre, whether it's crossing as a pedestrian or indeed reversing or driving into, from reversing out of the driveways, there is vegetation along there and they haven't cut them back.
No.
So it doesn't appear to be a perception that is unsafe.
Yeah, they're adjusting their behaviour accordingly. As you said, there's no evidence of accidents. We haven't heard any evidence of accidents. We haven't got any records of any accidents other than a vehicle collision 20 years ago. Is this something that the inspector needs to be concerned about? The fact that people are going down their driveways on the west side of Dart Lane and successfully, children in all, getting to the other side of the road?
No, evidently it's happening safely at the moment, and that position will be improved through reduction in speed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Next, we had Sarah Goodwin, and Sarah told us that she is writing not just as a Backwell resident, but also as her role as a paediatric intensive care consultant at Bristol Children's Hospital. She said, I've always been concerned about traffic and danger to children around Backwell Junior School with no safe crossings and single lane width roads, meaning vehicles mount the pavement and reverse frequently. First of all, no safe crossings then. What are we providing, please?
Yeah, we've got a number of pedestrian crossings, tabletop level access crossings.
Yeah, and she says single lane width. Is that what we're talking about on Dark Lane?
No, it's not. I don't want to put words in somebody else's mouth. I assume that means the informal working when there are parked cars, because it's not, Dark Lane isn't single lane width. Yeah,
okay. And she says the majority of the children at the school walk each day, many of the older ones unsupervised, and with their increasing independence. If they're doing that now, then what does that suggest, please, if they're walking unsupervised to the primary school?
Yeah, it suggests that there's a perception that the link is safe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that she's said children at the school. I think she means the primary school. I've seen the secondary school pupils, but let's assume that. Then it says, clearly any increase in housing in this part of the village will add to the position already made worse by the location of the recycling centre. I mean, is that right? Is it right to just say, well, you're going to introduce houses, significant number of houses, therefore it will make it worse?
No, it's not correct. And I'd refer at that point to the Statement of Common Ground, para 3.6.11, where the statement is, there is no evidence to suggest that in isolation the proposed development would have any measurable adverse impact upon the safe operation of the surrounding highway network.
Good. Okay. Anna Littlewood at 5 Dark Lane explained the position. She said, I'm objecting for the following reasons. Firstly, the road safety proposals are wholly inadequate and do not go far enough to mitigate concerns of parents in maintaining a safe route to school. Your observation on that, please?
Well, I disagree. I think the road safety measures and the traffic calming scheme will be effective.
Okay, what's the position of the Highway Authority?
They agree with that position.
Yeah. Okay, secondly, said Dark Lane is not able to cope with the additional traffic volume, so a capacity issue from the 125 home development where the only access is in and out of Dark Lane. What's the position, please?
Well, the position there is that North Somerset Council has instructed its own traffic modelling exercise and has concluded that the development, or that there is capacity in the junction to accommodate the development traffic.
Okay, and then thirdly, the loss of open green space, but that's not a traffic issue, so I don't need to trouble you with that. She says, if the junction is introduced in place of 23 Dark Lane, this will no longer be the case, i.e. children walking safe to school. My children would absolutely need to be accompanied to cross this road, particularly as the way the junction has been designed means that there is a raised footway crossover proposed right at the edge of the junction, exactly where cars will need to hover if there's going to be able to successfully exit onto Dark Lane. So saying the cars are just going to be waiting there, they want to get out, and they'll be effectively at the raised footway crossover point. Observations on that?
So that, as a principle and as an occurrence, is what happens at most junctions, where you have your tactile paving. So it's an informal crossing with your tactile paving, and cars stop at the giveaway line in front of tactile paving, whether indeed that's a raised table or not. And yeah, the principle of cars stopping to give way in front of an informal crossing is quite normal.
The suggestion, she says, is it effectively destroys a safe route to school and removes one of the only sources of independence for these children. What about that? Just effectively destroys a safe route to school.
Yeah, well, it's not for me to say what choices parents should make for their children, but I plainly disagree. The access is designed to standards, and it is safe, and yeah, I don't believe that will be the case. And I think also that in part it's the perception of what will come versus what will happen in practice. The fear, which I understand for local residents, that the volumes of traffic will be far higher than it will be. The speeds will be far higher than it will actually be. In that worst case vision, I appreciate the concern that will raise, but as a transport planner by profession, I know that won't be the case, and I wouldn't be taking that same view.
Okay. Now, I put in cross-examination all the questions I asked, I should say, to Mrs. Littlewood. I said it sounded like you don't want a crossing point at all, and she said, no, I'm not saying that. And I said, where is a better crossing point? And she said, I don't know. Has anybody suggested to you a better or more appropriate crossing point?
No.
Okay, all right. Then we heard from Angela Ribbon-Miles. This was the lady with the photograph of her children on the end of year 5, I think. And she says, in my opinion, the road safety mitigation that is being proposed by the developer doesn't go far enough to mitigate the danger to children and their families in crossing and navigating Dark Lane. Currently, our chosen route to the junior school from our house would include crossing at the traffic lights and then coming through the cut-throughs to exit onto Dark Lane at Summerlands. How is this proposal going to assist her in that route?
So if I'm correct in understanding, they are they're routing through the lanes at Summerlands and then crossing Dark Lane from west to east at our proposed crossing point. And as we discussed, there's a raised table and vehicles will be reduced. Vehicle speeds will be reduced at that point.
Yeah.
That's a betterment.
She says to cross Dark Lane from Summerfields, you have to lean into the road to see up Dark Lane before crossing. So that is currently something that's being done. It's being done without any accidents or evidence of accidents. So is that relevant then, please, that it's already a manoeuvre that's taking place?
Yeah, well, indeed, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's a demand that exists, and it's a manoeuvre that's happening safely now.
Okay. And she says, if the ability to park on Dark Lane is removed by your proposed parking measures, this road will become incrementally faster and more dangerous for pedestrians to navigate. Your observation on that?
Well, we're countering that point by the introduction of traffic calming.
Yeah, and in terms of the number of cars, the implication might be, well, you're taking all the parked cars off the road. So this kind of, if you like, inherent speed reduction measure of having parked cars so two lorries can't pass each other has gone down the whole length of Dark Lane. Is that right?
Well, indeed, as I've mentioned, physically we lose the equivalent of 2 parking spaces on streets by introducing the site access junction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm trying to avoid any sort of repetition of some of these points. Next, we heard from Mr. Dixie, but he dealt with ecology, so that would be a different witness. Then we heard from Mr. Brain, and he said the sight lines to the new access road via 23 are not within the legal 25-metre requirement. That's dealt with in your response to the experts' evidence. Is that right?
Yeah, it is, but I can comment on that again now.
Please, yeah.
First off, it's not a legal requirement. It's a the North Somerset Council design requirement. North Somerset Council design requirements also comply with the national guidance, which is Manual for Streets. They both documents, so the North Somerset Council Highway Design Guide and Manual for Streets, set out formulas for how we calculate the visibility displays that you need, and in accordance with whatever speeds you're dealing with at that time. So in this case, 2.4 metre setback and a requirement to achieve 25 metres is entirely in accordance with the 20 mile an hour speed requirements for both of those documents. But it's worth mentioning how much robustness exists in that formula. If I referred to the Highway Code as an example, which sets out its own calculation for stopping distances. So effectively, the requirement for the visibility displays, what informs it is the ability for an approaching vehicle to stop if there's an obstruction, i.e. a car pulling out of the access. The Highway Code states that at 20 miles an hour, it would take a vehicle 12 metres to come to a stop. Bear in mind, we're providing 25 metre vis. The Highway Code also says that at 30 miles an hour, it would take a vehicle 23 metres to stop. So in accordance with the Highway Code, our displays that we're providing would be sufficient for the current 85th percentile speeds, pre-traffic calming. So there's a significant layer of robustness in the MFS, Manual for Streets, calculations, which we can take comfort from. And what I'd also add is that Manual for Streets 2 references a study that it undertook in respect of the correlation between accidents and visibility displays. And this is in my proof of evidence at paragraph 4.1.20, but I'll read out the quote, and it says that this study has been unable to demonstrate that road safety concerns regarding reduced wide distance are directly associated with increased collision risk. So there is a significant layer of robustness in the visibility displays that we are achieving, and indeed they are compliant with North Somerset Council and Manual for Street standards.
Good. Okay. Are there any other points that you want to address? I've tried to limit it to avoiding the repetition in the submissions. Is there anything else you want to raise?
No, I don't think so. No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. Sorry, you look poised.
Well, yes, sir. I was going to say that I have questions for this witness, but they can be dealt with in the conditions section of the inquiry if you prefer, or I can ask some of them now. It may be better to deal with them in the conditions session. It's a matter for you.
Yeah, well, I think that's the most appropriate point, given the council's not providing any evidence.
Absolutely.
But just a question from me in relation to the two plans we have. Obviously, you're looking for approval of the access plan. And insofar as the access plan does show details which are inconsistent with the that traffic calming scheme, are we really looking for approval of the basic dimensions and layout of that access rather than the specific details of crossing points?
Yes, I would agree with that. The principles of the access junction, which is the bow mouth, its radii, which is 6 metres, the 6 metre width of the junction, and the sight lines, they're the key principles of the site access, I suggest.
And just a point of clarification, in relation to the traffic calming scheme that's been proposed, were you saying that you didn't think that the raised table opposite Summerlands was necessary?
So we've got choices in terms of the type of feature that we use there. We didn't originally propose a raised table. We had speed cushions. Obviously, bearing in mind at this point the higher speeds approaching our access were from east to west, and you're past the junction at that point. So we had speed cushions in that location. That was effectively the start of the traffic calming for travelling in the opposite direction. The raised table was in response to the stated pedestrian desire that exists and to try and offer some betterment in that regard.
But just to clarify, are you saying that something is necessary there?
Yes.
So just to clarify, and we'll probably come back onto this when we look at conditions. Are you seeking approval then of that? I think that's what's being proposed: approval of that calming scheme, subject to detailed design. Or are you saying it would be possible to leave open the final design and whether or not there was a crossing there?
So North Somerset Highways have requested that there's flexibility in the features and the details that are selected at that, or that are proposed at the detailed design stage. So it's conceptual at this stage.
So just in relation to the concerns that have been raised about that crossing point, are you saying therefore that in practice that crossing point might not actually be provided?
if that happens, that would be North Somerset Council's choice.
But just to clarify again, did you say that you didn't actually think that it was needed?
A feature there is necessary. I'm of the opinion that it can neither be cushions or the raised table. The raised table has added benefits, both from a traffic calming perspective, but the obvious ones are the pedestrian crossing enhancement. I think the point in that respect is that the movements are happening, and so we're seeking to try and accommodate a betterment in that regard.
And just clarification on another point, we were talking about curb-to-curb features, such as the humps. Did you suggest that they might be suitable for people to use to cross the road?
So the raised table crossings, yes, they're curb-to-curb. The humps, no, they won't be wide enough. They're not designed for that purpose.
And again, a point that has been raised but could probably be discussed in relation to conditions. In terms of the construction phase, do you envisage that, how do you envisage pedestrian movements along that road being affected?
So, as is normally the case, there will be a construction traffic management plan prepared post-condition by the developer that considers the existing conditions and introduces measures that will mitigate the construction activities. That will include restricting timing of movements and indeed the routing of those movements. And that's something that will be conditioned and would require approval with North Somerset Council at that later stage.
Okay, would anyone else like to ask questions? If you could just remind me of your name when you speak.
Yes, thank you, sir. Neil Brandt, Highway Consultant on behalf of the Parish Council. I've got one question for Mr. McHugh. In response to the inspector's question on what is sought to be determined through this inquiry, it was confirmed that that would include sightlines. And we clearly have a difference of professional opinion in terms of the application of technical guidance on the sightlines, and I reference my source as being CD 143 of the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges. Can I just seek clarification in terms of Mr. McHugh's published guidance or standards that informs his opinion?
So by visibility displays, Mr. Brandt, can I be clear? Are you talking about the vehicle displays?
Pedestrian.
Pedestrian displays. Sorry, the question is in respect to the guidance?
Yes, in terms of the published guidance that you've referenced to determine that the design speed is less than 20 miles per hour.
I struggled to reference exactly that, but it's clear you design, as we are doing on Dark Lane. We are not designing to, or the 85th percentile speeds, for example, are higher than the design speed, and so we are required to design to the actual speeds. The same must be true conversely if the speeds will be lower, and that is absolutely true at a junction for pedestrians.
So just for clarification, there isn't a specific design guide that states that you cannot design to design speed as stated in CD 143?
No, there won't be any design guide that says you cannot, but yeah, that's not an opinion that I have.
Is there anyone else? Okay, was there anything else you wanted to just pick up?
The question was asked. In terms of guidance, can I just ask you, is every aspect of vehicle, pedestrian, cycle and equestrian movement catered for by specific guidance?
Sorry, is every...
Is everything. Everything's got a guide distance, a guide line, a guide speed, everything that we might conceivably think of.
No, not everything, no.
No. I mean, we have DMRB, do we not?
We do, and indeed that's the document that Mr. Brandt referenced, the DMRB.
What is, and the inspector will know this, but what is the DMRB designed for?
Well, it's applicable for trunk roads and motorways.
Yeah, and are we dealing with a road of that kind?
No, indeed not.
What type of guidance should we be looking at?
A manual for streets.
Yep, and...
and indeed North Somerset's highway design guide.
And have you done that?
Yes.
Yeah, to the extent that there are applicable standards, then have you taken those into account?
Yes.
Yeah, and in terms of existing situations, is it possible to improve, is it possible in all instances to achieve new development standards on the sight lines with the existing situation?
Is it possible to achieve?
Yeah, can you, well, less cryptic about it, can you achieve the sightline distance looking up the hill when you're crossing west to east?
You can. It depends on where you're crossing.
Yeah. And just in terms of when the visibility is obstructed, as he says is obstructed, is there any evidence of accidents when people do cross if their visibility is, 6 metres at 1.5 metres back?
There's no evidence on Dark Lane that there's an issue there.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Those are my questions.
Okay, obviously we can't fit anything else in today, which means we are running quite a lot behind schedule. So tomorrow we would be looking at ecology, landscape, heritage, design, planning, conditions, closings. So I think we'll be looking at trying to make some economies there, if at all possible, in order to finish in time and allow a site visit to take place. Can I just explore the scope for an earlier start tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. Completely. We're staying locally, so it'll be no difficulty at all.
How about the council? Is the venue available?
I imagine it is, so just a moment. Yes, it can be open earlier.
there be any issue to those who wish to attend?
No, sir, that'd be perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
Should we be looking at 9:30 then? That would be acceptable.
Yeah, even earlier if you want. I don't mind because we've only just got to come in from Yatton, so 9:15.
Okay, 9:15 would be good if everyone's happy with that.
And can I just say, I envisage it being a lot quicker. I'm not going to need to spend any significant time with my witnesses. They produce their statements, and other than ecology, I don't think anybody has raised any other issues.
Okay, I imagine we might have some more discussion in terms of conditions. So I think it's safe to leave things in this room overnight. But until tomorrow at 9:15, the inquiry is adjourned.